today is May 27th, 2021. My name is Dr. Diana Noreen Rivera. I'm interviewing Edward Vidaurre for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Mr. Vidaurre, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. The University Library Special Collections and Archives wishes to archive your interview along with any photographs or relevant materials you are willing to share at the UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright of the interview and any materials you may wish to donate. Question 1. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and any materials you may wish to donate at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Question 2. Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people from around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Question 4. Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Okay. So as you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends the form to UTRGV University Library, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or any family members that you may have provided. So this will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. This leads me to question 5. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your pre-interview form in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you. And question 6. UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces may receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone number or your email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you so much, Edward, for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean so much to us at UTRGV Special Collections and the Voces of a Pandemic project. So with that, let me go ahead and turn to our interview questions. And let me read this opening statement. Edward, thank you so much for your time. Your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces of a Pandemic project, founded by our partners at UT Austin Voces Oral History Center. The Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Project is committed to preserving the stories of Latinx, Chicanx people, and those who work closely with these populations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Because you are an award-winning poet, publisher at Flower Song Press, hospitality manager at a national restaurant, father and husband, who is knowledgeable of the ways this COVID-19 pandemic has impacted your many roles and others in your inner circle. I know you have many meaningful stories to share about your life during this pandemic. So with that, Edward, before I ask you to share stories about the pandemic proper, as well as include some readings from your latest collection, Pandemia and Other Poems, please tell us a bit about yourself. So I recall in our pre-interview, you said you grew up and came of age in Boyle Heights in East LA. Please tell us, what was it like to grow up as a kid of El Salvadoran descent in the largest Chicano Mexicano barrio of the USA in the late 70s and 80s?
Hi, how are you? And thank you for having me on here. I appreciate it. Um, well, it didn't really seem like anything different growing up in East LA in Boyle Heights. I thought I was just like any other, you know, kid in the neighborhood that spoke Spanish and English and came from a familia from, you know, another country.
Mm,
And you know, it wasn't anything that seemed like a big deal until I got older and
mm,
saw, you know, the different changes and struggles that our people were going through. As a kid, it was fun, you know, just doing the things kids did, you know. But it was different. It was different. As I grow, as I got older, I noticed that I did have a different life from other children, and that I was in a melting pot in Los Angeles, and that I did come from you know, a group of people that were, you know, marginalized and just, you know, treated differently. But it was growing up in Boyle Heights. We were always just a group of kids, you know, like any, getting into trouble and having fun. Not until we got a little older did, you know, the gangs start to form, and we started to be a little more careful and responsible and just aware of our surroundings. We didn't really fear many things as children. You know, we were adventurous, rode our bikes and played baseball till the late hours of the night, um, until, you know, we started getting to an age where we were being targeted, you know, by either gangs or even by, you know, police officers, where, you know, you were at an age where you were looked at as suspect. So but other than that, you know, growing up with a struggle, you know, seeing our parents you know, having to work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet and still be on you know, on government aid. And that's something now, as I'm older, I struggle to understand, you know, how could my mother, at a time before my stepfather came into the picture, why, when she was a single mother, did she have to work so many jobs and still not make enough money to sustain and be with us and force her 3, you know, boys to be latchkey kids. It's still mind-boggling to me, because it's like she worked and worked and worked, and, you know, the only time we saw her was early in the morning before she left, and then late at night when she got home, to put us to bed or check on us. And
mm,
so that was difficult. That was difficult to understand. Now as an adult, it's like, why did you have to work so much? You know, and so those are the things that now as an adult I really try to understand. But as a kid, you know, there's so many great memories. You know, there's so many great memories and so many you know, fun times that I remember being a child. Um, with friends. But then again, as a kid, you know, there's that carelessness, and our parents do a great job of not, you know, putting burdens on us or letting us know that they're really going through a tough time. So they sacrifice so much so that we won't feel it until we get to an age where it's like, hey, you know, get to work. You know, you need to pitch in. I'm tired, you know. And so not until we become aware, that it starts to seep in, and we start to get that anxiety. And then all those things start to come into our being, that anxiety, that stress, and then we start to develop into different human beings, you
Mm,
know, where we're no longer children. So some of us grow up a little faster than others. We're forced to, because we do see that, hey mom, why are you, not home? Or, we become teens and we start needing you a little more. and
mm,
and and so it was difficult, but it was fun. And then it got dangerous.
mm.
And then it just, so many things happen.
Yeah.
So you start to develop a lot of different things, that carry on into adulthood,
Yeah.
and you carry it with you. And sometimes some of those things carry on as a good thing, and some carry on as bad things. Sometimes they become mental issues,
Mm,
and you have to deal with them as an adult, and you wonder what happened to you, or why do you feel a certain way, or why are you afraid of this, or why can't you carry on a relationship, or why
mm.
can't you trust, and stuff like that. So it's just things that I've been aware of, and especially during the pandemic,
Yeah.
it's given me room to just think. It's giving me room to just pay attention. It's giving me room to go back to, you know, as far back as I can remember, as a child, and even into, adulthood, and see where did I go right and where did I go wrong and where do I go from here.
Mm.
So
That's that's fascinating. I really appreciate how you went and speaking about the role of parents, parenting, and your mother. You have at one point in her life a single woman of color raising children, going through that working class hardship of having to take on multiple jobs for hourly minimal wages, right? And with that, she's doing her best to parent and her son, but at the same time, you're also exposed to those, as you mentioned, those dangers that exist, and kind of burst that bubble of that Boyle Heights child innocence that can still exist until this, I guess you can say, the street introduces that violence to a child. Do you have any particular memories that stand out to you, that you had to navigate in terms of danger on the streets?
well, let me and I still think back and I say, okay, so my mother worked and worked and worked to save money so that when the summer came, she would send her kids to Central America, because she
Oh,
couldn't, because nobody was there to take care of her kids during the summer when school was out. So
okay.
I think it's not cheap to fly to Central America. It's expensive, and so I was like, so you're working your butt off so you could save money so that when you can't take care of us, someone else could take care. I mean, just so many things, even during Christmas time, saving enough money to go back home to visit, her mother and her sisters and brother. So we it's like you work hard to just to survive,
Mhm.
just just to make enough money to go back home and see your mom, and then come back to work at it again and do it again all over again to do the same thing next year. And so, not till I was a teenager did the gangs start to develop. At first it was where the different parts of groups in the neighborhood, they used to play football against each other, and they wore street colors and they wore the colors of a football team, and they would play against each other.
Mm.
So that was the rumble. That was the fight. It's our team versus your team, and we play football. I was still a little younger, so I would watch, the kids, my older brothers, age, that would play, and they would get into scuffles and fights. And then after that, then the knives started coming into the to play. And then, one guy ended up getting a gun somehow,
Mm.
you know, and so then that came into play. And then, before you know it, there's a crack epidemic. And how did all this come into our neighborhood? How did crack cocaine come into one of the poorest neighborhoods west of the Mississippi. How did guns come into this neighborhood where we could, where we were still asking, our parents for a few bucks to, buy some chips and a Coke,
Mhm.
a soda can on the at the corner store. And so when the crack epidemic hit and all the, drugs started coming in, that's when it got rough. That's when it got really rough, or at least that's when I became aware of it, where, kids that were teenagers my age were driving around in Cadillacs and were wearing the best tennis shoes and the best clothing and I mean jewelry. And it's like just money, just cash was all over the place, you know. And we saw people from different cultures coming into our neighborhoods, buying drugs. It's like people that I didn't even know, had never come across. I hardly ever saw people other than, black and, Latinx people in our neighborhood, and everyone else we knew existed, but they were in, in other neighborhoods,
Yeah.
in the neighborhoods you wanted to go to school for and end up in because it felt safe, and you thought of them as rich and successful and stuff like that. But all of a sudden everybody in every color was, addicted and dying and just around.
Yeah.
And
And
so that's when I started to notice that things were changing. And then all of a sudden, friends started to die, friends started to die, and friends started to, end up in prison and jail, and friends started to drop out of school because it became dangerous,
yeah.
No.
And what years about Edward, was this kind of just this flourishing of narco culture in Boyle Heights?
um
Or about how old were you?
I was a teen. Crack epidemic, I want to say, I want to give you, it was in the 80s.
Okay. So that
um
the 1980s,
it,
when all of a sudden poverty meets narco culture, you see these extremes
no,
of
the crack
money.
epidemic the crack epidemic hit in the early 80s.
Okay.
And I mean, there was cocaine and all that in the 70s and stuff like that. But when the drugs came in, you know crack was just like available everywhere. By I was in middle school. I remember I was probably, I want to say about 1987, 1988.
Okay.
um because I remember, it was a little before or around the time the space shuttle explosion where the teacher was in it.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was around the time, because I remember around that time is what it's what it was a time when, kids were wearing the cool, Adidas outfits and the Fila shoes
Mhm.
and all that stuff. And it was around that time that I remember
Yeah.
that, all that stuff started to happen. So I was probably about 15. Let me see. I was born in 73. This was about 87, 88. Yeah.
Yeah.
Math. Not
And
my
I,
cup.
I find that so fascinating because, not just 15 years earlier, give or take a few, you had this whole flourishing of, in particular, Chicano culture and Renaissance, right? With the student walkouts in 1968 at Roosevelt and such. Was there any shred of that Chicano movimiento activism and ideology that could help kids remove themselves from this infiltrating narco culture invading Boyle Heights in East LA?
I remember as a real, small kid, a real young child. You got to remember, I come from a Central American background. So we weren't really, well, and my mother wasn't really involved in politics. She just came to the US and worked. So her thing, she was, leaving, civil war, war-ridden country in El Salvador. So her thing was stay out of trouble, don't get involved in anything that's gonna, put the light on you. You kind of like no te metas, just kind of live, under the radar. Just
Mm,
work hard, work hard, work hard. And she's got, at the time, she has two young children,
mm,
my older brother and myself. And so I remember the brown berets marching down our barrio,
mhm.
and I remember her telling us, put down the blinds and stay away from the windows.
Oh,
And I didn't know why, but we would see people marching, and it just seemed like noise. It seemed like chaos because we weren't used to it.
right.
And we thought, is what's going on? Well, it's like, she's remembering all this in her country. People, manifestaciones,
The
and people,
resistance.
the
Yeah.
resistance, and then people dying, and so her thing was stay away from the windows, because there might be, they might throw something through the window, or whatever. Um, and so it was I hate to use the word ignorance when it comes to that, especially for my mother, you know but in a way it was, is her not knowing what was going on. But at the same time, I could understand that, um at the time, and the way it was she didn't understand it was her fight. you
Yes.
know
Her
I don't
fight.
think she understood it was her fight to
And
be
so,
involved.
yeah. And so at least
you know
for your nuclear your core family, there was at that time, is a young boy growing up in Boyle Heights, there was a distance, and perhaps better said, a removal from linking El Salvadoran struggle with the domestic generations long struggle of the
right.
Mexicano Chicano.
Exactly. and
Mm,
and you know and even to this day, there's still that struggle between the Central American and the Mexican in the US,
mm,
because we still have that struggle of having to cross, a couple of borders to get here. And we don't get treated right on this border, but people don't talk about the border coming in through Mexico, where we still don't get treated right. And here in the US, we are grouped together with the Mexican struggle and the
mhm.
Mexican, and so, um, there's still strife, but I understand that we are kind of like in the prison system where everybody is grouped together by color and race.
Mm.
Here in the U.S., the Salvadoreño, the Central American, the South American, the Latino, for example, they need to be together, for the same fight against, the the powers that be,
Racism,
you
oppression.
know
Yeah,
and yeah, right.
right.
So, we still we're s- and we talk about it, and it's in the music, and it's in the writings, that they want us to kill each other, and they want us to do the things that we do. And so our mind is still like, they're providing the guns to our neighborhoods, they're providing the drugs into our neighborhoods, so that we could kill each other off. And oh, let them kill each other, it's just another, Mexicano dead. And it could not be a Mexicano, it could be somebody from Brazil that died. But
Mm,
to them, it's like it's another Mexican dead. Or, it's that's the mentality, and that's the verbiage used. And so we need to be aware that that's what they think about, and that's how they see us. And so, even though we see the big picture and the big fight, we're still fighting the small fights, and hurting each other, and not doing what's right by each other. And not until we learn and educate our own, can we get into that bigger fight. And so it's difficult. It's difficult. And sometimes, I mean, just like in any, you know, culture, there's the ignorance, and there's the laziness to want to understand. And then there's again the same people in our own color that have that internal racism, and they want to be part of that other culture and that other race that really doesn't care about them. But they feel that if they get wealthy enough, or rich enough, or educated enough, that they can be, better than.
mm,
And I mean, you're talking to someone who's high school graduate, you know, I that's all I have. But I'm aware, and I've learned to understand a lot of things just by paying attention. And a
Mm.
lot of the things are common sense, and I listen to people like you, and then people that are doing all the studying and the research, and it's like anything, you listen to those that know.
That's really powerful, Edward, and that leads me to the next question, because when we did speak, you had brought up that your highest level of degree attainment is that high school diploma, but yet you consider yourself extremely street smart, which influences the eloquence in which you understand systemic pressures and social systems that you just so eloquently spoke about. So I wonder, could you speak more about how the streets educated you to get to where you are today in ways in which translate into your current successes as an accomplished poet, as a publisher, and even as a restaurant manager, since that is also another facet of your life?
Right? It's that's been a part of me as long as anything else, right? And it's funny, I never write about working at a restaurant. Um, but just the whole survival mode that you get into living, where I grew up. But you learn more than just survival. You learn empathy,
Mm,
growing up in a neighborhood like the way I grew up in. Some do. Some people fall into, a different type of things, more a more dangerous mentality.
mm,
You know, I'm never going to be appreciated. I'm never going to do anything. um this is my this is what I was handed, and this is my life. So I'm gonna just go, guns blazing and all out. So um I guess I've known people that felt, well, my grandpa was like this, my dad was like this, so I need to be like this, you know and they don't feel or have the um I guess they don't believe in themselves enough to think that they could change for the better. And I was like that. I was like that. My older brother um never got into gangs. um he went a different way. You know, I'm very proud to say that in my family, the three boys that my mother raised, that we successfully were able to survive. I mean, I don't know if that's something to say that it's a success, but we dodged a bullet. We dodged several bullets, you know, and we were able to kind of maneuver and be able to live within uh the dangers and everything that were handed to us in the projects, and live through it by respecting what was going on. And then I say respecting because there was still a respect that we had to hand down to those that were doing what they were doing. They there were not many programs,
mm,
there were not many things in place for success. Again, like I said, we were kind of just latchkey kids. We were kind of just wandering the streets. We were kind of just looking for fun. We were kind of looking for fun, looking for, love, learning it the wrong way, learning from our elders. So if our elders were being a certain way, that's how we knew things.
mm,
So if we were being raised by a father that was machista, then
mm.
we grew up thinking that's the way it's supposed to be. If we were just learning what we saw. you know
Okay.
if we there was we got to think of all, I mean, I think of all that now. Why are people like this? Or why was my friend like this, and why didn't I you know end up this way? Well, he grew up in a different home. I have friends that grew up in a both father and mother home,
Mhm,
and very loving.
mhm,
But again, they were very poor, and they didn't they were able to to get out of it themselves too, because there was that unit, that love that said we're poor, but there's a way out. And
Mm,
then there were some family members where the mother gave up, the husband left her with the kids, she gave up, and she's just kind of, kids do whatever you want, and the kids, did whatever they want, and sometimes found uh the the support and what they felt as love through pandillas,
mm,
and they joined them, and they did feel the love. And I mean, I felt the love from my friends that were in gangs, hanging out, and lots of laughter, and you know just talking and listening to music. But it was time also to also use your head when it was like, hey, you guys want to have a good time and have some beers and smoke a little pot, yeah, cool, that's fun. But then when the time came when they said, hey, we're going to go do a drive-by,
mhm,
where was your head there? you
right.
know and some kids were like, oh, I'll do it, like, because you were either on drugs or drunk, and or let's, whatever, or I hate them. And you don't think of the end result, you just think it's a one time, or whatever, let's just do it, just like on a whim, and
Mhm.
and that choice there has ruined many lives.
Yeah. And
you
that
know
was a choice that ultimately you did not make because of all your successes. I recall also in pre-interview, you said that you're with the aid of your mother, of course, this path towards success for you and your brothers, and you in particular, led you to another secondary school outside of LA. I think you said in the Palisades, and then a little bit further north in Oxnard. So, what was it like to get out of Boyle Heights and see how the other half lives as you migrate north along the California coastline? What
right.
influence does that have to your success
So
or street smarts?
my mother, even though she was my mother was always aware, because she had her neighbors, her comadres, who would tell her, hey, your son's hanging out with the wrong crowd, or hey, he's, be careful, whatever. So, and she would, look at my grades, and I had I had left school. I had jumped over the fence to go to a friend's rosary. He had passed away. They had killed him. And so a lot of us jumped over the fence to go be part of it. And they saw us, the truant officer saw us and stuff, and we got away. We didn't let them catch us to go. And so my mom was aware of what happened, and she had already told me to not hang out and be a part of that. And so she pulled me out of that school at Roosevelt High School, you know um and she sent me to Pacific Palisades. you know so she sent me to Pacific Palisades. Well, I think I told her I want to go there,
Mm,
because it was by the beach, and I didn't want to go to another LA Unified school. um and I think from understanding her, she said they don't want you back. You're not gonna be at LA Unified, so we have to figure this out. And so she sent me to and I told her, well, my choice is to go to Pacific Palisades. I knew a lot of people that were going there, and a lot of and some of the friends that were going there was because they were kicked out of LA Unified. And so it was a long bus ride. It's like about, I want to say, about 45 minutes, if I can remember, to Pacific Palisades over there, by the beach. And it was just fun. I don't know, it's just stupid kid in me. I always wanted to be in a school bus. And so I was tired of walking to school. It was a long walk, and finally I was gonna get on a school bus. But so we started going. I went to Pacific Palisades in at the end of my junior year of high school, and finishing it up there. And I think a little bit of my senior year, and then things got really hot in the neighborhood, where they started doing a lot of drive-by shootings. And there was a few drive-bys there at the apartment, where, well, in the, you know whatever you call it, where I lived. And, I mean, we're talking, good sized bullet holes that were going in through the walls. And so my mom was like, no, I'm not having this, and I was hanging out outside. So like people knew where we all lived. So the thing was, I was in a gang by association because
Mm.
I lived on that side of that part of the neighborhood. I dressed like the homies from that side of the neighborhood.
Where the
I hung,
colors.
I hung out with the homies from that part of the neighborhood. And so I was part of it. So to them, it's like, you're a part, we're going to take you out. And so my mom she just got scared. And so she called an uncle of mine that lived in Oxnard, and she asked him, if she could set me straight. And he did. He was a no nonsense, and hey, you're gonna go to school here, and made sure that I had to fill out a attendance form from every teacher every day for every class. So I couldn't even skip school. I had to have a signature, and even like a little comment if I was interacting in class or not, if I
Yeah.
turned in my schoolwork. And I was like, okay. And so, I mean, there was nobody to get in trouble with over there, and my friends weren't there. My cousin was going to school with me, and he was a cool cat. And I made friends with a few guys from Los Angeles that were going to that school too, that kind of in a way also migrated to Oxnard because they had to, because of gangs. And they were from some really big gangs from LA too. They were from a couple of guys were from 18th Street, and some really big gangs that were known and to create havoc.
Mm.
And so again, it's like being in the prison system. You go and you hang out with those that are your friends, and or your the part of your same colors or cultura. And so I became friends with them, and they're like, what happened to you? And well, this and this, and they were cracking up. And so we became friends, and we started hanging out. But we started hanging out for the good,
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, we're out of it now, we're here. So and there was a respect level there at the school that they gave us, because that part of the state, in California and Oxnard, was very they were not committing the crimes, they were not doing the things that Los Angeles was known for,
Sure.
but they were starting to want to adopt into that lifestyle. And so they looked at us more with respect, and
Mm.
like, oh, you guys are cool and this and that. And we were kind of like, we're done, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we took advantage of that. That's, I guess you could say, kind of like stardom, right?
Sure.
and
Yeah.
um, and we kind of walked with a little with that extra flair and stuff like that, and kind of you know used it to our advantage, to put a little fear in some of the guys that were out there bullying others and stuff like that. And so um but it gave us a lot of opportunity to also talk to the younger ones that were wanting to do stuff, and we're like, it's not worth it. you know
Yeah.
some of them wanted to hear the stories, and we're like, they're not good stories.
Right.
So we were at a point where we were able to say, you know it's not good. So we were kind of like teaching them.
Sure.
you know
Yeah. That makes you in that cohort, that camarada of young men, you guys get removed from that urban violence into this kind of Oxnard suburbia, if you will. And you kind of share your street smarts with the other kids at the school, but also at the same time, in a sense, uh, bank on that urban coolness that's kind of circulating through commercialism and such in the late 80s and early 90s, perhaps.
and there was this one. I remember this one time I was invited to this get together by a local group of guys, a local gang, and I just
In
thought
Oxnard?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
was like, I'll go check it out. There were some cool kids, they weren't, matones or anything like that. They were just, kids that were hanging out and were trying to do something. And I remember they were like, "Oh, here comes the other gang," and I was like, "Oh shit." I was like, "What did I get myself into?" And so all these guys I'm with pulled out sticks and bats and stuff, and I was like, "What?" It's like okay. And I was like, "This is gonna hurt." It's like, this is gonna be a real rumble, but that's what it was, and it wasn't long after that again somebody had a gun,
Mm.
and so it reached that area, and it started getting that way, and then you started seeing the graffitis on the wall, and you started seeing some, it just started getting ugly, and I was like,
Mhm.
it's just migrating,
You've
I
seen,
mean,
yeah, you've seen pandemics before,
yeah,
gun and gangs spreading.
yeah, and so it's in there's an Ice Cube song that he has, and I'm trying to remember the name, but he talks about how they go to St. Louis, and people there are wearing their colors, the Raider gear and the black and white, and they want to be like the South Central gangs,
Mm.
and they're adopting the gang culture, so they're starting to dress like them, and it's wouldn't you know, a drive-by in Missouri, he says in one of the lyrics. So it migrated,
Yeah.
and it's in every pocket of the US. You might think there's nothing going on in the Midwest. There is. You might think there's nothing happening in like the song says in Missouri. Yeah, it is. It's happening in Utah. Yeah, it's in Utah. It's everywhere. And so you just have to know that there's no escaping it, right? Kind of like it's a pandemic, right?
And one
It,
that primarily affects young men of color and working class, right?
right,
It has
right.
certain communities that it affects.
It gets into us, and it comes into us, it shows its face very in a way that's like a romance. It comes to us beautifully at first. you know it shows us the music, it shows us the beautiful clothes, it comes to us in love with the women, talking as a man, or men for the women, and it's everything that's missing. It's everything that separates us from agony, from pangs of hunger. It's anything that separates us from domestic abuse. It's anything that separates us from sexual abuse in the home.
Mm.
It's everything that hurts in the home. That pandemic outside of the home fills that void with all the great things, but
Initially.
has a very bad ending
Yeah.
if you're not careful. Like anything, like
Yeah.
drugs, right? Like drugs, that one hit is, euphoria. It's wonderful. It's an ecstasy, and then after that you're chasing it, and you're never going to find it, and you're going to die. And that's
Hmm.
what it is, and
Sure.
that's what it is. and
Becomes
and
venomous. Yeah.
and how do we teach awareness? How do we teach that to ourselves? That
Mm.
continued awareness, that continued knowledge, or the continued, how do we continue to self-educate ourselves, even long after the books are gone, even long after you're out of academia, or even when you can't get into academia, or a way of learning?
Mm.
How do you do it without letting the sources that are feeding you all this mugre take over? you know it's one of those things that I was talking to someone about, where I was talking to another author.
Mhm.
I was interviewing him. He was one of my authors. He lives in Germany,
Mm.
and I was talking to him about how I started noticing during the pandemic that we don't have to leave our home anymore. We can have alcohol delivered. We can have the best food delivered to our home. We can have a movie theater set up in our house, so we won't have to go to the movie theaters. We can have an 80-inch screen with surround sound. We can buy the best couches and lounge in them. We can have, we don't have to go out and buy a CD. We can just download it. Um, everything. You don't have to go to the mall anymore. You can shop online.
Mhm.
You don't have to exercise. And if you don't want to, if you want to run and see, like, I mean, I was thinking about it. Okay, what about people that want to go exercise outdoors? Well, now there's that there's treadmills that put a screen in front of you that take you to mountains and different routes and stuff. And I was like, they're doing everything to keep you at home. And then there's the news media that's feeding you all this dangerous, uh, you know, just information that's keeping you stressed out,
Mhm.
keeping you afraid.
Mhm.
And he's talking to me, and he's like, that's what they call in Spain pan y circo, pan y circo, bread and circuses. They
Mhm.
keep you. I go, they're killing us in our own home. They're gonna keep us there until we die, and afraid to leave our homes. You're gonna go outside, you're gonna get killed by this huge bee that's coming in from South Africa, or a mosquito, or something like that. Or there's the pandemic and you can't step outside. And now you've got this haze coming in from who knows where, and the skies are yellow, and don't breathe it in, and X cosa. There's there's so much that it causes. There's a lot of people in the world that have a phobia for everything,
Sure.
and it just adds to them, and then in the politics we have people, like this past president who was just causing so much stress on people. you know it did to me. It caused a lot of stress and anxiety because I just couldn't believe everything that was being said. So I kept like countering it. Everything that he said, I was writing back and
Right.
like fighting it. And then I finally just like the
Mhm.
I unfollow and got away. And it's still gonna be there.
Yeah.
The same fear and propaganda is gonna be there long after he's gone, just in a different form and in a different body and from different, you know, aspects. And so again, awareness,
Right.
being
It
aware
seems like
that.
what you're describing, Edward, is now not so much the physical streets, but the digital streets, and how you're now learning from the digital streets, whether it's e-commerce or dealing with people, e-exercise, virtual exercise, or just the stream of information that we get on news outlets, some qualified, many others, unfortunately not, that feed misinformation, disinformation, etc. It's the digital streets that you seem to be speaking about now, informing your understanding of systems, and are almost uh, tolling that call for awareness, and the trap that may lay in the very near future for society at large.
Well, it's being aware of knowing that there's more coming,
Sure. Mhm.
and that whatever's news right now is going to be long forgotten in the next couple of days, because everything is so fast and every day there's something new.
Right.
It's like somebody was telling me, oh my God, this breaking news today. I go, okay. I go, pay attention to that breaking news. Okay. Now write it down. Write down that breaking news that you just saw right now that's really stressing you out. Now, in a week, look for that information on what freaked you out and see where it's at and what happened to it and what was the outcome. Or was it just a moment of breaking news to put fear in you and make you start talking and make you start, doing this and doing that. I go, because I'm still waiting to see what happens to Rudy Giuliani after they raided his offices, right? And everybody was like, oh, they raided. Okay, so what did you find?
Mhm.
Why is this breaking news? Why don't you break news when somebody is already taken and indicted, and because you already found all of this on them? Don't talk about it. It's just, you're just saying that it's happening. Stuff's happening all the time. You know, um, this thing about, oh, another school shooting or another shooting. I grew up around shootings every day. That wasn't on the news. I lost over 20 friends to gun violence growing up.
Mm.
I don't remember them being in the newspaper. You know, that
That,
was
that might also be some of the media blindness to the way gun violence has historically affected
right.
Black and Brown communities.
Right. It's like, oh, it's another, it's gang violence. Nos tiran a un lado. It's not important, you know. It's not important because it didn't happen in a prominent neighborhood, or it didn't happen to someone they think was important. But we still have the wailing mothers. We still have, those people. I mean, I think about my friend's mother all the time and how he's been gone, over 20 years. And I'm thinking, what is she doing now? And how does she feel now during every anniversary? Now, add every mother to that, you know, there's something to be said about how we treat, you know, the people that it's happening to, and again, awareness.
Awareness
What's
is key. And you're right to bring up that very important point, especially now in the 21st century, where for good and bad, everyone has a camera that can record news. News is happening every day, every corner of the globe, right? But then there's also that impact of immediate civic amnesia, where we forget because there's something quickly that comes in to replace it, right? And so with that in mind, because you appear to be there's not amnesia. Your brain is storing these historic moments throughout your life. So with that, I wonder, Edward, what are some I guess what I'm trying to ask is if you could speak more about points in your youth or your adolescence where your street education met up with a literary education, books that stuck with you and meant something to you, that influenced what you're doing now.
Well, and I always talk about it. I didn't I didn't know how to read a book or understand how to read a book until I was out of school.
Mm.
And I remember one day getting riding the bus to because I worked in Beverly Hills for a long time. I lived in East LA and I worked in Beverly Hills. It's funny how I lived and worked in two different lives, two different lives. I mean, I was able to develop a skill of being able to interact with people of a different, status, and then go back to my hood and talk, real street, and dress apart, and then live a different lifestyle. When I worked in Beverly Hills, I was able to mingle with very wealthy people and talk with them, and just carry conversations. And so, although I wasn't educationally, you know, in the same realm with them, but the street smarts helped me be give me that common sense, and be able to snap into action. So I would take a bus that would take, a good 45 minutes, sometimes longer, to work. Before there were the sub the metro trains that
Mhm.
now can take you there in, I don't know, 15 minutes. But I used to ride the bus, or sometimes I would hitch a ride with my dad, or my stepdad, or somebody who was on their way that way. But I used to like to ride the bus because it gave me time to just think, look
Mm.
outside the window and stuff. And but it was a lot of wasted time for me until it snapped one day,
Mm.
because I was always a people watcher. But and let me explain, let me go to poetry. I didn't become a poet until I came to Texas. So I didn't come to Texas until I was 26,
Mm.
or so. It was in late 1999, 2000. But even then, I didn't start writing until several years after. But I was always paying attention to people, just looking at people. I was real, nosy. I wanted to see what they wore, and what they looked like, and everything about people. And so I would ride the bus, and I would notice people are always reading on the bus.
Mm.
whether it be magazines or the little novelitas and books, usually the big old thick Stephen King type books, paperbacks. And I would always watch people, and they would always be reading, right? And I was like, just stare at them and stuff. And so I started picking up the newspaper
Mm.
to work. So I would, and I would go straight to the sports section, and see what my team was doing. And
Sure.
then I would kind of just skim, which, I think about it now, and yes, I didn't read through it all, but I did skim through a lot of it. But I always think that even that helps, because you still pick up on
Mm.
certain things. So I would skim through it and kind of read, and I would bore easily if it wasn't something of interest, or if it was difficult to read.
Mm.
If it was difficult to read, it would kind of scare me off. So I would put it to the side. And so I would, kind of do that with the newspaper for a long time. And then I remembered I had an old paperback from high school that my English teacher gave me one day, that I caused trouble in her class because she was teaching Macbeth, and I told her that I didn't want to learn Shakespeare. I
Mm.
told her that nobody in my hood spoke Shakespeare, and that it was a waste, and that nobody I knew ever spoke that way, and no one will ever speak that way, and that why are we learning that? And so she just told me, shut up, let me finish my class, and tomorrow I'll have a book for you. And the next day, she had Man-Child in the Promised Land by Claude Brown. And the book changed my life. I
Mm.
was able to relate. I was able to relate to the it was a book about the Black experience, and this kid who gets shot, who joins gangs, who becomes a pimp, and ends up in law school. He's in, just so many things in the book that resonated, you know and so I'm like, wow, they write books like this, right? I'm already out of high school, and I had never read anything, you know. And so I, walk into the dreaded bookstore after that to see what else there is.
Mm.
And I take that book with me, and I go, do you have more books like this?
Mm.
And so they take me to the section, uh and they introduced me to Richard Wright, Black Boy, Native Son. So that just like blew up in my face, and I start reading, books on the Black experience. I start eating up books like crazy, and I'm, still in awe about it, right? And then I come across Luis Rodriguez's book, Always Running.
Yes. Mhm.
And so Always Running comes into my life. And I remember reading it, and I remember being really mad that somebody would write this story. And I always thought anybody who wrote a book couldn't possibly know what was going on with, like, I was like, he wrote a book. He he doesn't know what the hell it's all about, you know, too smart, you know, people like us can't write a book, you know.
Wow.
People like us can't write a book. Somebody's writing our story. What the hell's going on? Who is this guy? So I was angry and ignorant at the same time. And at the same time, I'm loving it and appreciating it. And I can't stop reading it, you know? And so, I didn't realize there's a bio on the author,
Yeah.
and I'm able to, oh, well, he lived through this, and I'm like, and then so I'm more like, oh yeah, well then maybe he got lucky and somebody, gave him money to go to school, and he's, good for him, blah blah blah. Todavía todo enojado, right? So then I come across other books, and I'm like, are there any books in Spanish or by, and then they introduced me to, well, there's poetry books, and then I got introduced to poetry by or I picked up The Labyrinth of Solitude by Octavio
Mhm.
Paz.
Mhm.
And I remember reading it, and it being very difficult for me to finish and read it. To me, that it was just difficult. I still couldn't read that level. So but to me it was gold. It's like, I'm gonna keep it, I'm not gonna throw it away, I'm gonna keep it, and one day I'll be able to read, right?
Mm.
And so I'm still, going, and I could read 4 or 5 pages, and then what did I just read? Like, who is this guy that keeps coming up, and who is he? So I have to go all the way back. And so for a long time, that was me, and so then I come across and I start asking, are there any more books by these authors? And I take a book of Richard Wright and Luis Rodriguez, and they show me a book by Richard Wright that's a collection of haiku, and then a book of by Luis Rodriguez called Concrete River. Both are collections of poetry. And so I'm like, what is this, right? And so I'm reading the haiku, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. It's like the imagery was like, that's trippy. And then I'm reading Luis Rodriguez, and I get mad at him again because he's writing poetry, and there's a poem in there called Aliso Village, where I grew up. And I'm like, I know this fucking dude didn't grow up in my hood. What's he doing writing about my hood, right?
So, Edward, I wonder, like, one, I think it's fascinating how you come into this literary consciousness, as well as, perhaps, I think it might be safe to say, this POC ethnic consciousness, and even perhaps activist consciousness via Black American writing. You get introduced
Right.
then to Latino, to brown, through the open door of African American. And then there is this, I don't mean to play armchair psychologist here, but this sort of maybe this transference or displaced anger with, like, what the heck is this, Luis Rodriguez, what is he doing, this vato, thinking he's all writer for? What's up with this? And
Right,
there's this
right,
antagonism toward,
right,
Always Running, toward the book of poetry by Rodriguez, and someone who, rather seeing a mirror and shaking hands with that person in the mirror, this brown
right.
vato who's doing well, there's this wanting to lash out at him. So I wonder, do you want to remark on that before we move on?
Well, he's become a literary hero,
Yeah.
and now that I have a publishing company, I'm kind of, and he has a publishing house, and so I'm following in his footsteps, in a way where, he's helped me, realize dreams, in a way that he probably doesn't know that he's done it. And I did meet him in Los Angeles during AWP, and I told him that I was really angry at him, and he kind of chuckled at it, and I explained it all to him. And so it was really funny. But, and again, awareness, you know after all of that, I started to be aware when it came to writing that I was already reading literature, but I was doing it through music, where I was reading and understanding literature through hip hop music, you know, through Ice Cube, through NWA, through all the different writers that were, putting it down in hip hop. And I was one of those kids that opened up the little jacket on the cassette tapes to read the lyrics
Mhm.
and rapped along with the song because I wanted to learn, the lyrics, and then it helped me understand what they were talking about. I'll be riding in a car with my daughter, and I'll listen to a song by a hip hop artist. And okay, we live in Texas, but a lot of the West Coast rappers talk about street names and stuff like that. And I say, it's funny, Bella, because kids from all over the world will rap this, but don't know what the hell they're saying. I go and I'm like, I know what Normandy is. I know what turning left on Crenshaw is. I go, they're street names. This is a street, and I can visualize where they're at the time. And I went, that's so cool to know. I go, there should be like a class on hip hop literature that breaks down lyrics and tells everyone, this is what this stanza means, and this is what that means, and this is a street in Los Angeles, and then give some kind of history of why they used that street name or whatever. I go there because there's so much that goes into that.
Yeah,
And
those the
poetry,
poetics of social spaces for
and
sure.
it's
Yep,
poetry,
it's
and
out there.
so I was reading and listening to poetry for so long, and I didn't know it, you know, not until, I became a poet did I realize poetry's been in my life for a long time, since I was a child. Now I even go further back, and I start realizing the music that my mother used to play, on the weekends when she would be cleaning house, and she put the music on high volume, and she had, the songs playing, and it's like it's all lyrics, it's all poetry with music, it's all poetry with instruments. I go, that's what it was. It's been in my life for as long as I can remember. you know um some of it, most of it was love and romance, and then the hip hop was the activism and the resistance, and and instrumental music. It was just uh us being able to take in the music without the lyrics, and to me that was nature's poetry in music.
Hmm. So
you
is
know
that the opening where jazz also intersects?
Jazz came in with hip hop because when I'm going through the lyrics in the little, again, I'm reading through it, and hip hop samples music. So they always give you the little writing that says this, song has a sample from from this record. And so they will go into the record of who they sampled it from, and a lot of them were riffs from like a jazz tune, or from Parliament, or something like that. And so my thing was, I became the research guy, and I would go down and trickle down to, okay, well, who influenced, okay, this says that it's from a song by Grover Washington, so I'll go and look up Grover Washington, you know, and I would listen to it, and I'll go, oh yeah, that's what that sounds like. And so that's where they got it from. And then my thing was like, well, who influenced Grover Washington?
Hmm.
And then who influenced that person and that person and that person? And it leads me back to the beginning, I guess, of everything, right? So it gave me a deeper appreciation to music as a whole, and jazz was always there. There was always jazz in every influence of something. So, and then I started to realize there were jazz poets, and I started to realize that jazz, it's funny because there's things that I feel like, oh, okay, I was influenced by it, and I'm like, okay. And then I realized there was already something going on with that.
Mhm.
And I feel like what this big wow, because it's like, okay, nobody told me about it, and I found out about it through my own, you know, and that was special, you
And
know.
where would you be doing that research? Because would that be in a library
I
space
would
or
I would buy the cassettes.
okay.
I would buy the cassettes, and then I would go to the I would go to the bookstores. I was not the libraries. I would go to bookstores, and I would look up names, and I would buy books.
Okay. So
So
the
I would
bookstore
buy,
was your library, that
right,
pre-internet
right.
resource where you would go
Yeah.
hunting down the
And, let me-
stacks,
and
searching.
something else about libraries, I was afraid because as a kid, I took out a lot of books and I never took them back. And I always thought that I was going to get arrested because I never took the books back. So that's this big fear that I think a lot of people have, you know, that they're afraid to go back to the library because they owe one or two books. They don't realize that they can go in there and not have to take books out, that there's not a picture of them at the front, or that the librarian has a list of people to look out for to take them away. you know
That's a
and
good
so
point. Perhaps thousands, if not millions of adolescent library felons who shouldn't think of themselves as such. The
right,
library is an open space
right,
and a free space, not part of the prison
yeah,
system.
yeah.
That's a good point, Edward. Okay. So I want to transition more towards COVID-19, the pandemic, and the poetry collection. So with that, let me ask this question. The human influences in your adolescence. We've talked a bit, or you shared a bit about your mother and your uncle who pulled you out of East LA. And these are, of course, voices of the past that you still carry with you today and that influence who you are as a person and a poet. Are there any other people that you would like to share about in terms of how they are influential, and especially in these times where we all find ourselves in the crosshairs of this viral pandemic, but also, of course, social and political tensions?
Well, someone that you say influenced me in writing.
Yeah, any prior influences that stay with you,
Yeah,
you're speaking to you.
you know, my mother, I owe a lot to her when it comes to writing. And I didn't realize that until I got older, um, because she used to write letters to my grandmother. And when my grandmother used to write back, she would have me read the letter to her. And these were letters in Spanish. And then she would have me write back to my grandmother, in her voice. So, I mean, my mother has beautiful penmanship and she knows how to write. It's sad that she couldn't, but she wanted me to write. So she had me write in cursive and in Spanish and write back to grandma, and she would dictate everything she would want me to write to her. She would say, write the date on, whether it's the top right corner, and then she would, put querida, abuelita or mama. And so stuff like that, that as I'm older, I'm like, wow, my mom had me, involved in literature in her own way, you know and I remember her having all these little libritos of novelas that she would trade off with her comadres.
Mm.
They would all get books, and then they would get books, and they would say, "Comadre, ¿tienes esta? Do you have this one?" "No, no la tengo." And they would kind of trade off. Yeah, they would trade
Fun.
off with each other, and yeah, yeah, it's funny. And a lot of these books were not for kids. They were, these little novelitas with with that showed women that were voluptuous, and the men were handsome and stuff, and it's kind of like the little cowboy books that were out there. But she would have me had me write. And when my mother would send me to El Salvador around the latter years of me going there in the summer, um my uncle used to take me with him to work, and he owned a bookstore. Again, I didn't really take in how much this impacted me as a writer, or anything, until later, because it wasn't, something that I thought was doing anything, but I realized that it did. And he would take me to the bookstore, and he would take me to the university and help distribute textbooks, because he would sell them to the university. And
And this is
so
in El Salvador, El
in
Salvador.
Salvador. Yes, and so we when we were there at the bookstore, he would sell books, and I would sit in the back room. I would sit on the floor, and he would bring books to me to read, and he would bring me all these little, comic books and stuff, and I was reading them, and they were in Spanish, and so I didn't realize that I was, reading, books, and kept my knowledge of being able to read in Spanish, because I wasn't doing that back in the States anymore. It was all English, you know. So I was reading Mafalda comics, Garfield comics, Peanuts comics, and all these things in Spanish. And so every once in a while I would get up and pick up a textbook that he was selling, and it was like on engineering and economics and stuff, and I was like, what the hell is this? And he would tell me, oh, this is the stuff that they use at the universities. And I was a kid, and I was like, whoa. I was like, man, this is hard. I wish I could remember if there were any books on literature. I wish that I would have been introduced to like Roque Dalton, the Salvadoran poet.
Right. Who
When
you
I
mentioned in the
Right,
collection. Yeah.
which now has be I've decided that I need in my life, and so I wish I would have known about more about the arts of Central America and El Salvador, and so but literature was still there.
And isn't that ironic that your mother, of course, like so many immigrants and immigrants of the Northern Triangle in Central America, you cross all these national borders to come to the U.S. Southwest, and yet your experience being in the university sphere and space is ironically when you're sent back to El Salvador over summer and you're exposed to, because of your tío, this world of literature and literacy, even if it wasn't the great poets of El Salvador or otherwise, it's still ironically, you go back where y'all came from to get that literary knowledge and exposure. And I just find that amazing that that's
Yeah,
part of the
I
experience.
I recently spoke with my uncle and I told him, have you ever, more in depth about, book readings and stuff? I go, did you ever have a book reading there at your bookstore? He goes, once I did for a poet. He said I had a book reading for his book release. He's like, yeah, he sold a bunch of books there and the place was super packed. He goes, there was probably, he said, about 300 people that showed up to listen, and it was packed, and they were all outside, in the just coming in and out and stuff. And he's like, yeah, but the guy was a jerk. He's like, he never thanked me for everything that I did to him. I go, them damn poets. I go,
It
I was
wasn't Roque, huh?
no, no, no.
Oh.
Yeah, it wasn't him. But he just he said that that he never really. I talked to him about books on literature. He goes, no, that he didn't sell much of that. That he sold more books that were, books on engineering and architecture and stuff like for doctors and stuff like that. So, but I go, but you had him there, right? And I'm like, but you had him there, right? I'm like, you did have books on that. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, I had everything. He's like, I go, do you still have them? And he's like, I probably have stuff in storage, because he was forced to close down his bookstore not too long ago because of all the gang violence that surged and stuff like that, and so that's another story,
Well,
Uh,
but still related that to continue with the theme of different pandemics, the pandemic of gang violence. When you mentioned bookstore closures, I was thinking of all the little mom and pop bookstores that have struggled, and major bookstores, right? Barnes and Noble,
yeah,
because of not being able to walk into the actual box store, right? And it's a matter
right,
of how quick can your publisher or your book company, bookstore transition to e-commerce, right?
right.
And online, which takes me into this next segment of questions. So we can make the turn to the COVID-19 pandemic. This set of questions that is basically about your personal understanding, first encounters, and then it'll blend right on into your poetic response of Pandemia and other stories. So Edward, can you please tell us when did you first hear about COVID-19? And how do you recall learning about this particular pandemic? Was it a radio, TV, social media?
um I think it was around the time everyone did, when it was in the news, where they were saying that, you know, it was happening in other countries. I think I became more aware of it when it was hitting hard in Italy. You know, I think I became more aware of the fear of being in a pandemic when started hearing stories about people not being able to leave their homes, and coming out on their balconies, and that's as much as they could do. And so, but when I think back, I think I heard of people getting sick even as early as December, you know, for
That
things
December
that
2019, right?
2019, where
Yeah.
people had, you hear stories of people that died and they didn't, it wasn't the flu, it
Mm,
wasn't things that they would understand, but then their symptoms were very similar to what COVID symptoms were. Um,
mhm,
so yeah, and I started writing right away
mm,
about it. And I think it was around late May, early June when I completed my collection, Pandemia. Um, and I had, I mean, I don't know, just something in me just sprung into action to write about it. I know a lot of people were saying that they couldn't write during the pandemic, but I have noticed that that to me it's become a thing where when there's something that needs to be put out there, that I want to be writing it down because it's more historical
mm,
and healing.
right.
When the kids were killed in Newtown, Connecticut, that same night, we were going to have a poetry reading at a local uh, restaurant in McAllen, Texas, and we were wondering, should we read? My daughter was the age of those children
Mm,
when that happened, and I remember I was real distraught. I remember I didn't have a job at the time, and so I was going through a lot of emotions, and and I remember picking her up from school, and all the kids holding hands and smiling and laughing, and I remember breaking down in my car watching them because I was thinking about how this wasn't happening in Connecticut. They
mhm,
were not going to have that. Those kids weren't coming home, and so I felt lucky that I was picking up my daughter. I felt angry. I felt sad. I felt so many things, and and I felt, how many times are we going to have to go through this? And I hope I never get that call
right.
where I'm not going to be able to bring my kid home. And so I got together with Daniel Garcia Ordaz that night and other poets, and we met up at the restaurant. Are we going to read or what are we? And I said we have to. We all agreed we have to. We
Mhm,
have to. We have to. We have to continue to read. And at the time, many of us were writing. You know, we wrote about healing and anger and guns and stuff like that. So we read that night, and then afterwards we sat around and talked for a long time and said we need to do something.
mm,
And that's how we came across and came about putting together an anthology titled 20, um, in memoriam for them, and even and it could have been for us at the time because we needed it, but we also felt that um if anybody came across this collection of writings, and if it healed them and if it helped them, that it was important. And
mm,
so, I just feel that whenever there's a tragedy, whenever there's a call to action, that it's the responsibility, to journalists, to writers, to artists to jump into action. You know,
Did you all give any of the proceeds from that collection to anti-gun violence organizations or groups or the Sandy Hook directly or?
right? That book was published by El Sarape Press, and I know that Daniel Garcia Ordaz, and it's in the book where proceeds to that were going to a group going out there to Connecticut. So,
Oh, okay.
so I didn't handle that part of it,
Yeah,
but
the financial aspect. Yeah.
right. But it was that's what was part of putting that together.
And so
Um,
Sandy Hook is then what really galvanized the I guess you can say the Rio Grande Valley, the LRGV poets to really invite and also be inspired to write because of political, starkly, directly political events, and use poetry for those activist purposes, collectively, of course, speaking.
For that, yeah,
Yeah.
for that,
Yeah. And you
for
in
that
particular.
purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so,
And so
you
when
know,
COVID comes, yeah, it's just
so then,
fire to the fighter.
right, right. So then, you know, how do we deal with a pandemic? You
Yeah.
know, how do we deal with writing about it? You know, we're going to write about grief, about loss, about absence, you know, about, you know, a lot of things. And so I didn't know what I was writing about. I didn't know what to write. I didn't know how to feel. You know, I had never been in, I, I, I guess I had been in a situation of a pandemic, but never in a situation of a pandemic like this,
A
where it was
viral pandemic.
a pandemic where it was like there's no one knows what to do.
Yeah.
You know,
Let me ask you a couple more uh, personal understanding questions, and then we can get targeted to the collection. Um, what types of media do you rely on to feed your head to understand the pandemic now that we're a year and several months into it and aiming to get out of it, at least in our nation? Do you rely on Facebook, on a particular news outlet or website?
well, you know, I read a little bit of everything.
Okay.
You know, I try to read a little bit of everything, and I try not to believe most of it. You know, because it's like, who do you trust? Like, how do you know? Right? I try to stick with NPR, you know, and sometimes, you know, I'll look at Bloomberg for things, and try to stay away from the CNN and the Fox, because they're both, it seems like they're fighting. They're kind of like going at it, and who's gonna, you know, who's gonna win, or who's gonna, but when they have special guests on, I do like to listen to it, because it is important to know what they're saying, because, you know, regardless of what they're saying, you can hold them accountable for what they're saying, because it's live, you know. So it's like, okay, you said it, you know, you're saying it, so it's paying attention to them, and and just kind of a local paper también, or sometimes, you know, and I'll like read the New York Times and the LA Times, and sometimes the Washington Post, or whatever's, you know, available. um and I'll try to read both sides, you know, those that are, you know, on this side. I try to stay away from the real propaganda, you know, ish ones, and the ones that are obviously, you know, telling, you know, you to go for this guy, and it's all like, you know, just they have these they have it's not written by anyone that you can even research, you know. And sometimes I'll read an article and I'll do research on the person who wrote it, you know, and I mean, you could even research the person who wrote it, and then you can even Google and do stuff like that to find out, have they ever been caught in writing falsehoods, you know. And so I think there's even like things you can research that way, that help,
Yep.
you know. And
Consider the source. That's what we try to teach our students in freshman writing courses, especially rhetoric courses. Who
yeah.
is this information coming from, and what are their credentials, or how are they perhaps not qualified to be
Yeah,
writing and feeding?
who are they quoting, and where did they get the quote from, and
Yes.
is the quote accurate, and what context did they get the quote from, and did they, you know, make it look like different from the entire, you know, speech, or the entire paragraph, you know, because
Mhm.
you could take a little bit of something and it's going to look differently, you know. It's going to
Right.
be, you know, the perception is reality, right? Whatever they,
Exactly.
you know, blurb for themselves is going to be your truth, or your understanding of the truth, when in reality, before that, they could have said, well, this isn't what I believe, but they said this, and then they're only going to quote what isn't their reality.
Mhm. Those are words very true for the times, pandemic times, COVID-19 times, because of course we also have heated political tensions, right?
Right.
that are inflamed for the past few years, which of course coincide with the pandemic. A couple other questions before we hit to the collection. What are things that you understand about COVID right now, or perhaps things that you wish you understood more at this point in the pandemic?
I really don't understand much more than to, you know, have great personal hygiene,
Mm,
you know, mask up, stay away from crowded areas where you know that there's people that don't follow guidelines. Just be aware.
mhm,
I mean, listen to the science. I think I was very I think I was lucky enough to stay away from getting sick as being an essential worker for over a year.
mm,
And then I got COVID a year later, and it was just out of one careless act by a careless person that brought it into to our home.
wow,
But we were pretty much staying away, and me being an essential worker and being around others, I made sure that I was always masked up and careful so as not to bring it home.
mm,
um, my daughter got COVID last year, and we thought we had COVID, and that we were, I guess, because my wife was sick around the time my daughter got COVID. And so I thought I had COVID, but I was asymptomatic. But I took the test, and it was, and I thought, okay, it's probably just a false, negative. And I'm not going to go, I think I had it, and I ended up giving it to her. So I thought because I was out there, I brought it home and they're sick. But I came out negative. My wife came out negative. My daughter was positive. She was sick for about a week. She got over it. So for all this time, we thought we must have had it, but now we don't.
right.
Then not until I took my daughter for a checkup, and they checked the antibodies, they saw that she had the antibodies and my doctor said, "You don't have the antibodies. You never had COVID."
Mm,
And I was like, "What?" So it's just okay. So how did she get it, right?
mm,
So then I had to be a little more careful. And somebody, my wife at the time was gardening outside, and someone came up to her, and well, she was gardening without a mask. She was by herself outside, and she came up and was around my wife. She was a someone that was around. I
yeah.
don't want to say who they were,
No,
but
no, no, of course not.
um but she was careless about it. And I think a couple days later, she told my wife I had COVID positive, and then
Oh,
my wife was already feeling it, and she's like, I think you gave it to me too.
mm,
And then my wife was sick, and my wife didn't realize that, and of course, I had been around her too, so it was like 2 days later after that I started feeling, you know, sick, and so it just happened, and so
so that was
yeah.
so your daughter had it in 2020, and then through this outdoor but nonetheless close contact event, it got introduced to you and your wife in
Right.
2021.
And so I removed, without even before getting tested, I removed myself from work and said I can't work, because my wife is positive, and I'm more than likely going to be positive, but I don't want to go to work and chance it until you see a proof of it.
Yep.
But they can't see me till Monday. This was already Friday night. I can't get tested till Monday morning. So I said I was scheduled to work the weekend, and I said I'm not going to come in the next couple of days. So I'm going to take personal time off, just to, you know, just for the safety of the people around me and my staff. And I ended up being positive, so we had to take leave. for that. And it's awful, you know. I wish nobody would have that, you know. I still feel the effects every day of you know, of that lingering, you know, problem of having COVID.
Oh my goodness. Was your testing experience smooth over in McAllen from what you can
Yeah,
remember?
yeah. It was like their testing of you know, getting that, you know, nasal check and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a little discomfort, but you know, but it's necessary.
So are you eligible to get a vaccine now, or has not enough time elapsed between the having
I
COVID?
I already set up my appointment for the end of this month.
Oh, okay.
It'll be 90 days.
Mm,
They told me I had to wait 90 days. So it's going to be a little under 90 days, but my mother's coming at the end of June, and she's fully vaccinated. So I want to make sure that I'm fully vaccinated by the time she gets here, just
mm,
so she has, so there's that peace of mind.
right.
Right. So we're all getting ready to get vaccinated
And your
for
your
that.
daughter included, who I think she's 13 or 14,
She,
so
she's
she's
four. She just
eligible.
turned 14, so she's at the age where she's eligible for that. So,
Oh,
and
okay.
she said, "I don't want to get tested until we all get tested together." So,
Mm.
okay, all right, we'll do it.
And for now, even though the mask mandate has ended, according to the CDC, you
Right.
still believe in masking up.
I think, yeah. You know, it's one of those things where we need to listen to the science, and if the science says you don't need it anymore, that's fine. But I think for just to give people that are out there that still haven't had COVID and are also afraid of taking the shot and don't, and are still susceptible to getting COVID, I think them seeing me with a mask just gives them less of a worry,
Mhm. Yeah.
less of a, because they're still afraid, you know. And I can't go around thinking, well, I'm already, you know, I'm already vaccinated. I'm good. You know, you need to jump on board. You know, there's people that just can't. There's people that mentally still have a fear of, and I have to respect that not everybody can do it.
Mhm.
And if I help a little bit by wearing a mask in their you know, peace of mind, or just in their, you know, stress levels, by not, you know, adding to that, I'll do it. I mean, you know, we've done it for this long, you know, why not? You know, I'm not somebody who goes out a lot anyways. You know, I do a lot of work inside the home anyways. So, I mean, if I'm gonna go to the store, if I'm gonna be out doing anything, even out for dinner, you know, I'll wear a mask and take it off if I'm sitting down to eat, and then put it back on to go back into the car, you know. But
Mhm.
I'll still wear it, you know. I'll still wear it
And I
for
guess in particular, at your place of work, the restaurant, correct? Or
Right, I wear it there. People don't need to wear it to come inside. But our company still mandates that the staff wear it.
Mhm.
So that's fine.
And Edward, last question before we get to Pandemia. Since you do have that wonderful knowledge of that this transnational perspective with family in El Salvador, does your family in El Salvador have a similar understandings or beliefs about COVID-19 as you, or are there some family members in El Salvador or elsewhere in the States who take it the pandemic more seriously or maybe even more lightly than you?
Well, you know, my family in El Salvador, they're a little older in age, some of them, and they did a better job, I think, than we did by staying clear of getting it. I think they they made, there was a lot of curfews
Oh.
for people there. And my mother was in El Salvador during the pandemic when it first hit, and she couldn't come back. So she was there for a long time, and she said, we can't go anywhere. And she says, your uncle, he goes out once a week. I guess they let, I guess, cities or areas, they lift the curfew of areas that can leave the house. One member of the home can leave the house to go out and get essentials, and then go back, but you couldn't leave. So she's like, your uncle leaves once a week to go get groceries and food, and then he comes back, and we stay here. They're like, there's no reason to go anywhere. For what? It's too scary. So yeah, they did well. They did real well. I haven't heard of anyone in our immediate family outside of the states getting sick, or having any tragic or any having any tragic news from them during the pandemic.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
I-
unlike Brazil, and even unlike the States where we have these mass explosions, El Salvador, despite being a third world nation with many conflicts and troubles, um, managed pretty well with this viral pandemic.
well, at least my family did.
Yeah,
They
at least your family
Yeah.
in keeping illness and death at at zero, it appears from your
Yeah.
family's experience.
Yeah, knock on wood. They did
Knock
well.
on
They
wood, yes.
they paid attention,
Yeah.
and they know well. And again, they pay attention when they're told there's something to fear. you know it's
Mm.
like, hey, because there's toque de queda, so you can't go out at a certain time because we'll arrest you. Okay, we're in the house. It's kind of, they've been conditioned
Mm.
in some way. I don't know if it's a good thing, but it helped during this pandemic.
Yeah,
you
that's
know
fascinating. Okay, so with that, let's turn to Pandemia and other poems. So as a bit of a preface for our listening audience who will be listening to this archive as it's stored in the various digital collections. You are an award-winning poet. Your collection, Jazzhouse, has earned the 2020 Award of Merit by the Philosophical Society. That's of Texas, right?
yes.
Okay, and you're also the McAllen, Texas former poet laureate from 2018 to 2019. And of course, prior to this COVID-19 pandemic, you've already authored several other collections of poetry. In addition, as we've been mentioning, you're a father, husband, hospitality manager at a restaurant that's part of a national chain. So Edward, tell us, before the pandemic, how did you navigate all of these multiple roles while being such a prolific poet? What's part of that creative process that just seems to work with all of these balls in the air that you're juggling? How do you write? When do you write? Is it in a flurry in the middle of the night? Is it in the day when you get some downtime? What's the creative process prior to pandemic?
It's Well, my dogs are going crazy. um it's a little bit of everything, I think. I've been able to work is work. I have to work 50 hours a week. So I can't do nothing when I'm there. That's my job, and I have to do that. But outside of it, I get up super early in the morning to do research and reading. As a publisher, I do a lot of reading of manuscripts.
Mm.
Um, and I work with a good team of people that help me with putting the books together as well. Um, and so for writing, it does come in flurry sometimes. I always have my phone with the notes app, and I'm always writing down ideas and things that I'm thinking
Mm.
for poems. That's always been something that's helped me, is keeping track of things that I'm thinking so that I can remember. um, but I find time to write just throughout the day,
Mm.
and then I put it together. And when I'm not doing the editing, and I'm just sitting down in front of the computer, or if I have a pad and paper, I start writing it and doing that. But hey,
Do you want to take a pause to take care of anything that you have going
yeah,
on your
give
end?
me
Okay, let me
give
do
me
a
a couple
pause
minutes.
and then
Okay.
we can edit it. No worries. All right, here we go. We're back on. So the editing team at UT can work with the pause we just took.
Okay.
All right, so we were talking about creative process and how you were able to navigate all of these various roles pre-pandemic. What about when COVID-19 spreads rapidly, March 2020? Your daughter is now at home doing remote education. There's these new anxieties on top of old anxieties, not to mention a 2020 presidential election with cultural and national political tensions flaring. What does that do, Edward? And I don't want to say disruption, because you have Pandemia and other poems that you got out there. So as opposed to disruption, how does this fuel your creative process?
It slowed down my it slowed me down when it comes to thinking I had to rush into things.
Okay.
I slowed down and started to appreciate boredom. Started to um, appreciate silence. I started to look into things that I was taking for granted,
Mm,
like I have a home. Why isn't there a pretty garden? You know? And so I started to remove myself from the things that were bringing fear.
mm,
And I was also thinking of death. And I was like, what are the things that I haven't been doing that I could be doing that I'm gonna miss out on?
mhm,
So I even before that, I was always in the backyard and making sure there was water in the water bowl there in the back for the birds to drink water, um, bird seed in the bird feeder, but it was more like a ritual, just doing it. But now I started paying attention to, you know, what time they were drinking water, how much they were eating and who was eating all the bird seed, and why didn't I have butterflies, and so did I need to start planting certain things for that. And so I thought I would become this big green thumb, and start doing that, but my wife took over that part. And you should see what we have now. We've got sunflowers that are like growing, 5 6 feet tall, and we have rows, and we lost all that during the freeze not too long ago. And we thought all this work and everything that you put into it, and I was like, that's okay, we can start all over, right? And she's out there again, and we got the roses, and we know, okay, well, what survived during the freeze? Maybe that's what we need more of in case. So she bought more roses. So we got roses and sunflowers, and started planting, um, bunch of different things. And so now we see them, and now we see bees, butterflies, even the spiders. And I'm like, oh, look at this spider, leave it there. It's like, leave it there, look at the web it's producing, that it's putting out there. And it's cool because it's eating the mosquitoes that land on the web and stuff, and it's getting bigger. And just paying attention to nature, paying attention to our own selves and stuff like that. Just a different way of looking at things, and takes us away from the fear of what was really going on, or the reality of life as we see it. There was a way to get in some form of meditation with ourselves and with
mm,
nature, and understand that this is going to happen. This has happened many, many years ago, and this will happen again in the future. And we need to know that it's part of the world, and how things come and go, and that we have no control over it. We're just here for the ride. And what are we going to do with this ride?
mm,
We have to just take advantage of it, and live it. And I've been thinking a lot about death lately, and I think of those that have passed away, that are really, really, really famous, and that are really, really have done really, really great things in the world, and in literature and stuff. And I'm like, they've passed away, and life has moved on, and people forget, and people move on, and just think. And the world is so fast nowadays, and with the internet, and the way we gather information, and spit it out and take it in, that people don't have time or give enough time to absorbing you know, things like people that come and go,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
So we have to, I mean, unless you're one of those people that love history and bring people back into the world through literature and reintroduce people that have gone, people were, a lot of us are going to go and live in the world and come and go, and that's it. You know, the only people that are going to remember us are our children and our spouses, and will be remembered through anniversaries and stuff like that. So we have to live our life for ourselves to our fullest, to say, hey, we we did something for us. You know, people are gonna go on without us and live without us and stuff like that, and that's fine too, because that's the way it is. But we 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 just need to make sure that we are doing great things every day, or we're planning to do great things with whatever we're doing, and that we're leaving an imprint that's going to stay some way, somehow, that will influence or heal generations to come.
Mm.
So that's why I stay busy with writing.
Yeah.
That's why I make it important. That's why I'm always busy, because I never know when it's going to be the last time that I take a breath. And I always, say that I'm going to die in the middle of a project. There's going to be an unfinished project when I die. There's going to be a book that's going to be in the middle of, process of being published, that I won't be there to see it flourish, whether it be my own or someone's that I'm working on. But I have to understand that it's okay, that it's okay, and that's why I work as fast and as hard as I do on things. It's because um we have to. We can't lay back and think we'll get to it. The we'll get to it, you never get to.
Mm.
You know, we have to just be, you know, hard and determined always,
Mm.
and knock it out and find a way to do it, or surround yourself with people that are going to help you reach it,
Mm.
and be one of those people that help support others reach their potential, so that you know I mean, we've got to do this together, and we've got to get the right works out there. I mean, I'm very happy with the works that we're doing with Flower Song Press. These are all the books that I wish I read when I was when I was writing that damn bus. These are the books I would have read. I wish I would have read, and 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 I think I would have had a different, um outlook on school and
Mm.
stuff like that growing up, and I probably would have been more active in the resistance and in activism when I had more strength and when I was younger, you know, and not older as I am now, but it's okay,
Yeah.
because I'm putting out the young voices also that are doing it, and so I'm doing it through them at my age now, and it's a good thing. So I'm doing it for my child, and I'm doing it for her children's children, and for yours, and for everyone that's looking and searching for voices of people of color, and people that are saying important things of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, that this I understand what you're saying, in the sense of my life, like yours, was this interesting I guess you can say a rearrangement where uh doing the type of work that I do as a college professor, life slowed down in certain areas. I wasn't on the road as much, traveling 70 miles between campuses or going here and there at that I guess you can call it the rat race, so to
Yeah,
speak. And I the way that you mentioned your and you have a section in your collection called diurnal rhythm, right? Is one that kind of turned on the switch to slowing down in a domestic sense, where you're able to, because you've always been an observer as a poet, in your previous 6 collections, you're observing people, places, spaces. But this gives you a time to really, as you say, reflect domestically on the domestic rhythms of life and the garden and the neighborhood. But then, of course, there's also that activist uh, part of your life, as represented by the images around your room, right? Where we're pulling, you're also pulling from the very real civic concerns and marches and protests for democracy and equal rights that have been going on before this pandemic and especially during it. And that allows you to be incredibly prolific, as with this collection here. So with regards to the collection, Edward, you open your collection with the section called Pandemia, and your leadoff poem is titled Creation. So tell me a bit more about your creation of this opening poem, in which you narrate this biblical-like Genesis that extends the traditional 7-day Judeo-Christian creation story into days 8, day 9. You omit day 10, which I hope you're going to be willing to discuss, but you conclude with day 11, which is the day that you write, quote, a child was born, a boy who is yet to be identified. The boy would be named COVID-19. Can you please speak a bit more about creation?
Right. It I've always I'm always having these real vivid dreams about weird things. And so this one was one of those where um you know I see, I always see figures that are very obscure, that are very like fuzzy, out in the distance, and I always try to um make something of it, and I always bring spirituality and religion into it, because that's what I'm always trying to look for the answer to. Is there a God? And
Mm,
if so, where's the sign? And if so, why isn't there this? Why isn't there that? And so um I've always I was reading, actually, and I read a lot about in a lot of different uh of a lot of different things. And so I was reading the Bible around that time when I was writing creation.
mm,
And so I was like, I'm gonna write something that's very similar but different, something that's very extraterrestrial,
mm,
something that's not very, cliche to the Genesis, something that's not very you know um I guess I know what the next line's gonna be type thing.
mhm,
So it just, I started with day one, and then it just started sprouting from there,
mm,
started going from there, and I think I went up to like wrote up to like more days than that, but I ended it there. And then I thought of maybe even doing a book just on that, on just the creation, and going with that. But I'm one of those that, I stop, and then if I stop and don't continue to do it, I feel that ahí acabo. Ya se acabó ahí. And then I always say, okay, well, I could always write about it later, when it comes up again. But when I skipped over day 10, for me, day 10 was none of our business. That's where the woman spent time nurturing her body and taking care of her child, and then introduced us to it was like saying it was her body and it was none of our business. you
okay.
know we have no right to interfere with the with her body, sort of like um being a pro lifer, right? you
Okay, I see.
you go in there and try to um try to get involved in her, and it was just me saying, it's her body, it's her choice, it's whatever she wants to do. And she decided that even though this child is not identified and is going to bring havoc into the world, it's her choice to bring it into the world, and it's our deal to find a cure and a way to deal with it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's kind of weird, it's kind of weird to explain it, because it's like saying, sometimes, you know um you don't know what you're going to give birth to, but it's not our choice to say not to give birth to it because they have an ailment, or early tests show that they have a disability. So go ahead and you know what I mean.
I
So
understand.
it's like it was a woman's choice to do what she wanted, and she was there's nobody to stop her.
And is there a particular reason why COVID-19 would be gendered as male?
As male,
Mm-hmm.
um I I don't know.
In your poetic mind.
Well, I guess we're the ones who start all the wars, and we create the most angst in the world. And I always see women as a healer,
Mhm.
and so I always see women as the ones that do right by everything. And so if you read God Is in my collection, you'll notice too that when I put God as woman in that poem, that she's the righteous one,
Okay.
that she's not the one that's the one to question about anything, but it's the male presence of a god that we have issues with.
Ah, okay. Yeah, the male presence.
Because I
Yeah,
mean,
male fabrication of a god.
because like for me, my mom is perfect,
Ah, okay.
like for me, my mom is perfect. And even in Catholic teaching, um people pray to the Virgin Mary, they pray to the mother of God, right? And then there's this whole joke that they say that hey, you go up to God and ask him, um, that Jesus goes up to his father and asks for something. He goes, go ask your mother. He still has to go ask his mother. You know, yeah, it's one of those things where even dads, go ask your mother. Even me with my daughter comes up to me and goes, hey dad, and I already know that her mom probably already told her no, but now she's coming to dad because I'm the sucker, right? And she's like, dad, can I? And I'm like, did you ask your mother? And she's like, well, I did, but I'm like, she kind of what? It's either yes or a no. But I've been the one who has said, well, yeah, that's cool, and mom has already said no. So it's always ask your mother. Your mother knows best.
Okay. So other than your Catholic upbringing, was there any other inspiration that you drew from for creation that you would like to mention?
For creation, not really.
Okay.
Not really. It was just living
Yeah.
living during through the pandemic, the silence, the nature had a lot to do with it. Again, I wanted God to be a big presence in the collection, the question of God, and I know that there's a lot of resistance to a God and to God, especially now in these times. I'm very aware of that. I'm very aware that there's a lot of people that are anti religion, and that's them and stuff like that. But I think sometimes people too have a lot of really they really have to dig deep into what they're really against, what they're really resisting, right? Are they resisting just the people around their church, or are they resisting the church, or the religion? Do they hate the religion, or do they hate the people that run the actual church itself. I've had issues with the Catholic Church because of people in it, but some of the greatest people in my life are Catholics also, and and I've always felt a closeness to um, my faith, because of my mother and my grandmother, and because of prayer, and because I've never, when I've put myself in the position of a person of prayer and seeking knowledge and spirituality and peace, it's always been a great thing
Mhm.
when I've let it into my heart and into my life in a positive way.
Mhm.
All the other stuff that surrounds it, to me, has always been, well, there's always going to be an evil that's going to want to take me away from it,
Mm.
you know so that's where people adopt other religions and other ways of being spiritual, and that's okay. I'm also into good energy, and I'm also into sage. I'm also into palo santo. I'm also into a lot of things that bring peace into my life.
Mhm.
I'm also a believer of a lot of things, but I do believe, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but I believe that there's a whole plethora of gods to believe in, and that they work in unity for peace and love, you know and I think I wrote a poem once where I said, what if it was Jesus's day off, and it was one of the other gods that was in charge the day that your prayer didn't go through, you
Mm.
know and so it's one of those things where there's like a head, and then it's got all these extensions, and they all have their own Jesus, por decir, and it's this culture believes in this one. I mean, because how are you going to make someone believe in a blue-eyed Jesus, and everyone in that receiving end is black?
Mhm.
You're telling them that, what are you telling them? It's, we need to be aware of what we're trying to make people believe. And so it all boils down again to amor al prójimo, love thy neighbor, and knowing what that actually means. And it doesn't literally mean love la vecina next door, but when you say neighbor, is everyone outside of your home. And when you love them, it doesn't mean love them as in, I love you and I want to kiss you, but the love of, hey, I hope that your life is going well. I hope you're healthy. I hope that you have a job. I hope that you're not, crying at night. I hope that you're not sad. That's how you love your neighbor. It's
Yeah.
wishing them well through inner peace and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, I
So
mean,
during the pandemic, then it seems like your collection, as you mentioned, spirituality, uh, God, sans the church, right? Because people can, as you're saying, people can make things messy, but the root of Catholicism, spirituality, that's something that runs the length of the work. Do you feel that, well, this book came out or before you contracted COVID, is that correct?
right. It came out in August of
Okay.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wonder then, this is more speculative, Edward, but have you written any poems during your illness with COVID or post COVID that you wish, oh, I could have included that one in here in
Uh,
Pandemia?
I don't look at it that way because I feel like this book was complete,
Mm.
but I feel like it's something that, you know, um, yeah, it could have been in the book. A lot of other poems that I wrote that I didn't put in the book could have been in the book too, but um, I mean, it's there's so much to be writing about all the time. I mean, we're still in the pandemic.
Of
you
course.
know. And I would have to have stopped writing after this book to not have poetry for it. But it is different, it is different. I think I've written, even some that are closer to home when it comes to dying, because we did lose my wife's grandfather to COVID. So I wrote a poem um, on that, and it's not in the book.
Mm.
Um, but it could be something that's part of maybe an anthology of pandemic poetry, um, but or it could be something that comes out, you know, many years later as a remembrance of what we went through.
And especially the Latino community, of course, it's as we along with the brown and black communities have been impacted exceptionally with these times. So moving forward to advance the subject of the collection, medical professionals like Dr. Fauci, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, along with social justice activists from belonging to the NAACP, ACLU, as well as scores of other folks, have declared the ways in which COVID-19 has spotlighted as well as exacerbated the continuing problems of racism in our country. Uh, in short, many folks agree racism is a pandemic, uh, along with a serious public health threat. So I bring these issues up because, at least in my perspective, uh, it's evident in the title of your work, Pandemia, that while some of your poems specifically address this viral COVID-19 pandemic, you are also, as a poet, invested in remarking about other forms of pandemic, not to be separated from this viral COVID-19 pandemic. For example, could you talk about how you see this collection responding to social injustices like racism, bigotry, homelessness, and other cultural tensions overlapping in these times that impact our nation in ways that we've yet to overcome?
Yeah, I think during the time of writing this book, we were also going through the uh, the killing of George Floyd, the civil unrest. you know, everything that was going on with police brutality in the United States, and this is ongoing. This has been going on for a very long time. I lived through the LA riots and Rodney King trial when I was living in Los Angeles, and even before Rodney King, even before it was caught on video, it was happening to our older brothers and people in the neighborhood with cops there, and so it was nothing new. It's just being put on spotlight because of technology, you know. So it's just something that's bringing back to many of us a PTSD that we didn't want to revisit,
Mm.
so we are being we I remember a lot of the things from my childhood because there are things that are happening with the world today that were already happening back then that are reminding us.
Mm.
And so it's taking me back to that time in my life where, oh, police brutality, I remember. Oh, you know, uh, unrest in the streets and activism and this, I remember. And it takes me even further back to remembering a little kid hiding behind the curtain in the shades, watching the Brown Berets parade and march down our streets. And now I could differentiate the difference between a protest and a march, right? Where people were marching and calling out for justice, and then and protesting in a way, and then you have the protests in the streets where the fed up protest.
Oh, the riots. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
yeah, it's just, it's more of a scream than it is, hey, I want to, you know ruin my neighborhood. No, it's being fed up, it's fighting back, you
Mhm.
know It's I'm tired of you. It's the person at home tired of being beat,
Hmm.
fighting back.
Right. Where
It's
peaceful
it's
protest goes into violent riot.
it's
Yeah.
the nails in the face of the abuser. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, ya estoy harto. Leave me alone. And it at the end of the day, you cause from your defense. It looks like you caused the most damage, but in reality, it was just you being fed up with all the damage that has been caused to you. Um,
And,
right.
and are there certain poems in the collection that speak to that civil unrest that we are dealing with now, which is again just a continuation of our nation's uh, grappling with racism and uh, other forms of injustice? Are there certain poems that you can point to that shore up other
Last
forms of
breaths.
pandemic? Okay.
Last breath is the last poem in the collection, and that one is, yeah, that one deals with racism and it's pretty much a poem I wrote during the time of George Floyd's death. Exactly because of that.
Yeah.
So that has everything in there. That has the activism, the death, the murder, and just the fed upness of it all.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, there, I did notice that the word breathe or breath or breathing, it traverses the collection. And in my view, and especially with this final poem that closes off the collection, it really gives breath and breathing that multiple meaning of being a viral symptom, but also being a symptom of other forms of pandemic, like racist or racism as a pandemic, which we all can link back to those words that George Floyd said, right? And
Well,
other men
it-
of color, I can't breathe.
we start with creation
Mhm.
and first breaths, right?
Right.
Life, and we end it with death.
Mm.
you know and in between we're breathing and we're trying to stay alive. So this book is the I guess you could say the the birth and the death of a person, metaphorically, and in the middle of it all, you're living the life of people,
Mm.
and then ending up with the death of a person. So you know um that's the way I see it. We're creating a life, and then we're ending a life, and in between we're fighting for that life, for our own life, through breathing, through understanding, through fighting, through nature, through love, through whatever people go through in life. and
Mhm.
then, and then uh you know people throughout the pandemic have died in different ways. you
Yes.
know Some died in their sleep, some died through suicide, some died, alone because they couldn't have family around them. And then we had a murder, you
Mm,
know,
some died, yeah, with a
and
knee
that
over their back.
that that caused a change in this country, and just a different, turn of events in our country for the future. And hopefully it's for the better. But it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be a struggle, but it shines a light on the truth of history in this country. And it's been going on for too long. And the thing is, I don't think people talk much about the history of this country, because they don't want to hear about it. They love tragedy. Let me tell you that people love tragedy. People love to see tragedy on the news. That's why, and that's when I started being aware of the feeding of tragedy to us. Again, we go back to pan y circo, right? The keeping us entertained, right? And keeping us you know, kind of having us think what they want us to think. So it's keeping us entertained with fear. So stay home and be safe, but we're going to show you everything that's going on in the world that's ugly, but you're going to accept it and you're going to enjoy it, whether you say you enjoy it or not. It's taboo to say you want to see it because it's not the right thing to say. But how many times did we not see those planes crash into the towers at 911?
Mm.
Over and over and over again, right? They should, right? And every time they give us a little written scripture before anything, saying, you know, this show is not intended for viewers under a certain age, we say, oh, this is going to be a good one, you know, right? It's again the drama, the building up of something that's not good for us, really. It's not, because it's not teaching us anything good. So whenever there's a car chase in California and Los Angeles, they'll rip through Oprah or whatever of one of your favorite TV shows to show you a car chase, and everybody is hoping for that to end ugly. That's the truth. That's what they want. We see it in movies, we see it on television, and as long as it's not happening to them and to the people they love, it's okay, you know. But people don't talk about it. They don't want to say it, but they're glued to the TV, right? Because it's a tragedy, and it goes back to people fighting lions. It goes back to bullfighting, and that's why people accept cockfights, and that's why people accept bullfighting, and that's why people accept you know, just those kind of things, and because it's entertainment.
Mhm.
That's why people fought lions back in the day, you know, to the death. That's why boxing is okay and UFC fighting is okay, and people want to see somebody knocked out cold, because it's something that it's like an anger that they want to let out that they can't, but they do it uh you know, through the boxer, through the bullfighter, through the bull. They want the bull to kill the matador, you know. They want to see death. They want to see blood. They want to see, you know, something that's not going to hurt them. But it's okay if it happens to others. That's why racism is still the way it is today, and that's why it's not going away soon, because people, as long as it's not happening to them, it's okay. Even if it's their own race, as long as it didn't happen to their immediate family, they still watch it. And I give so much love and praise to those that go out there and say enough is enough. It didn't happen to me, but they are my brother and my sister, and I am them, you know. You know, that's why we have to have the mentality of in Lakesh, you know. We have to feel that. We have to believe that you are me and I am you, and whatever happens to you happens to me,
Yeah.
because it does. Because I am going to come in contact with you one day, and if I allow for all this anger and fighting and crap to invade your space and your life, and it's built up and made you this horrible person, dangerous person, then I'm going to have to live around you, and I don't want that to happen, right? And going back to the restaurant business, you know, I always say this to my staff, you know, there's always this one guest that's and this is just using it. I'm not saying there's always this one guest, but use it as an example. You have to treat every guest as you know, you have to treat them all the same. Yes, you're going to have those guests that are going to want something for free. They're going to complain to see if they get something for free. That's okay. If you've got 10 guests and one of them is doing that, and you know they're doing that, let them do it, because the other 9 are not doing it. But if you let that one guest get a hold of you mentally
Mm.
and ruin your day, you're going to treat the other 9 the same way.
Mm.
as if their legitimate complaint is just like that one person.
Mm.
And then we're going to lose people, and we're going to lose, customers that way. Now, let's go back to the guest that is, let's say, a bad tipper, and I had this one guest a long time ago who would go into the restaurant and have a cup of coffee and watch the news religiously every day. Cup of coffee, and he would drink a pot and a half of coffee, and the coffee was 99 cents, and he would leave a quarter change, a quarter tip. And the waitresses were like, "Oh man, he's so cheap, and all he does is drink coffee and smoke and this and that and whatever." And I'm like, "Do you know what this man does?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, he's in a suit." I go, "This man is a general manager of a furniture store, and every Christmas we cater to that furniture store, and we do their Christmas party, and it's several $1,000s, and it brings in business." I go, "Not only that," I go, "you see a lot of his employees eat here daily. you know they come in here daily, all the time." I go, "Because he's cheap when it comes to tipping, but he tells everyone about the great service that we give him here at the restaurant." I
Hmm.
go, "So you can't assume that somebody is a certain way because of something. You have to look at the bigger picture."
Right.
So, you may not know it, but he's bringing you business, and he's bringing people to you that are big tippers, and that are giving you money, and that you give, providing for your livelihood. So, you know, we are going to come across people in our lives that are a certain way, but we can't treat everybody that way,
Right.
because then we become the bitter people. We become the people that people don't want to be around,
Right. And
right?
what you just described, that's that I would venture to say the vast majority of poets, that's that core humanity that it seems to exist in every poet, understanding that I am you and you are me, right? And we need to move forward in peace to make this world a more prosperous and safe place for everyone out there, right?
And we are aware of the toxic people.
Mm.
We are aware of people that really do their damnness to ruin moments, or talk bad, or make things very awkward, or whatever. And we do have choices to make, and it's to remove ourselves from situations. And not everybody can do that. Sometimes we try to be heroes and try to fix people
Mhm.
that need more than just us to fix them. They need professionals to do it. you
Mm.
know and so I've learned that I've needed to remove myself from certain situations, because I'm not skilled enough, or the you know have that in me to be able to to do that. And so I have to be honest with myself when it comes to things like that. And I have to be honest with myself in a lot of things, and even in poetry.
Mhm.
you know I can't remember a poem for the life of me. I can't be a slam poet. I know that. you know so there's things I can do. I don't write rhyming poetry, and when one of my poems rhymes for some reason in some stanza, I'm like, woohoo! It's like, whoa, I did it. But I didn't try to. But there's people that have those skills. I don't have those, but I'm okay with it. you know I'm okay with it, and so I keep going. I
Mhm.
move on to what I know, and what I and I try to learn the things that are of interest to me. I mean, just the other day, I posted on social media that I'm afraid I graduated high school in 1991, but I took the first step in applying for college. You know, I don't know how or what I'm going to go for, but I want to, right?
Congratulations. Are you doing an online program, or do you think you want to go into an act or UTRGV, for example, or
Well,
another?
I was looking at the UTRGV forms and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, the obvious thing would be, education or literature and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm like, why not, psychology, or why not something in the form of helping people with behavioral issues, you
Mhm.
know? Um, so it's different things now. Now it's getting even more real and scarier, but
I was
but
going to say also, in addition to humanities or social sciences, I wonder, because of your background in restaurants, as well as publishing, finance or marketing or business.
and that's what's neat. Well, and that's something that I do need, for the publishing company part of it,
Mhm.
the grant writing and stuff like that, to make it easier and find a way to continue the work, you know.
Right.
So there's so many options, and now it's like, what, like, but yeah.
Congratulations, Edward. Um, in terms of you, you said something that stuck with me a bit, where you said, you're writing poetry, but you realize there's folks out there who you're just not going to reach, or who are unreachable. But yet, through poetry and through this collection in particular, with Last Breath, with creation, there's always the poet's hope of or aspiration of I guess, proliferating awareness, planting a seed, perhaps. And a final poem that I want to address before I invite you to read some of your work from the collection is a poem that you titled Generation Z,
Mm,
a poem that's only 12 lines long, yet it addresses yet another pandemic, metaphorically speaking, that of cell phone addiction,
right.
perhaps even implied social media addiction, and its negative impacts on a family unit. Can you please remark on Generation Z in the way of what inspired you to write it, or perhaps on a more personal level, as a father of a teenage daughter who is of Gen Z?
I wrote this as part of a series of poems that I labeled people watching. And I was at the mall with my daughter, and we were sitting at a Starbucks together, and I ordered a coffee and she ordered a tea, and we're sitting there, and she went into the store across the coffee shop to go check stuff out. I go, I'll sit here, because I wanted to, finish up on some reading. But then I put the book down and I just started watching people. I started listening in on conversations and stuff. And then I saw this little boy that was with his mom and dad, and he was trying to get their attention. And they were both kind of, the dad was on the phone, and the mother was, I don't know what she was doing, but the child was not getting the attention. And so I was like, you know, I do that sometimes where I'm on my phone and then my daughter gets up and walks away and I go, what? And she's like, you're not paying attention to me. And I'm like, no, 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 no. It's because and it's like either something I just had to finish up, I'm in the middle of typing something. And then I realize I'm sorry, and I go, come back and tell me. But I noticed that the child it was just, it was not happening. And I was like, what if there was a snake on the floor? What if the kid put something in its mouth? How long would it take for them to notice that? And I was like, and so that's how the poem, uh, came to be. And it's kind of macabre, I guess you could say. The poem is real dark, but it's a reality, you
Mm,
know. And it's sad, but it's it's um it's our now,
right.
with social media. We catch ourselves in that, where even I think I was at a restaurant. This was maybe like 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I think. Yeah, we had phones back then, right? Cell phones.
Yeah.
And there was a party of four girls in a booth, and they were all texting and they were all smiling. And I went up to the table and I said, are you all texting each other, is what I want to know. And they started laughing, and they were. Like, one was texting the one across and this one was texting the one across. And I was like, and they were laughing and stuff, and I was like, wow, like they're having fun, but this is, what it's come to. And I said, we are going to become the generation of the hunchback viejitos. We're going to develop that hunch in the back of our, necks because of the phones. you know Many years from now, you're going to see a lot of us as viejitos walking this way, because that's how we spend most of our, you know time. And I caught myself today. I was watching television before we came on, and I was watching this boxing match, and I noticed that I was watching it like this. And I'm like, why am I not sitting up straight watching it? Well, ¿por qué estoy batallando? Why, ¿por qué estoy batallando watching it like that? And I started saying, okay, I need to start being more. I'm like, shit, I hate that I have to be more aware of things like this, and and and, and I noticed I caught that, and I was like, Chihuahua, it's like it's happening, it's things like that, and I don't know. It's just that's how that poem came to me.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I just wanted to ask real quick that that moment of noticing or observation when you were at the mall with your daughter, was that during COVID or just right before COVID spread?
That was like, I want to say it was not here yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not here yet, because that was part of a collection that I was writing called People Watching. Yeah, this was, I think, in 2019, and it was yeah, it was before we even knew about that.
Okay. And what happened to that collection called People Watching? Did that get sidelined to focus your energy on accumulating, writing, generating poems for Pandemia?
Yeah, some of those poems went into another manuscript that I have going, that I believe will be published at the end of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then with that, Edward, would you please, for the archive, read a poem or two from your
Sure.
collection at this time?
Sure. Okay. I'm going to read two poems. One is titled, do you want me to read two or three?
However many you want.
Okay. Okay, I'll read the one we talked about, Creation. I'll read God Is. I'll try to read what we've talked about.
Okay.
Creation. Day 1. Everything crawled. God was heard, but not heard. The trees were rooted first. They intertwined inside Mother. Then came the big yawn. Sprouting ocean, sprouting sound. Everything crawled on the first day. Day 2. God was speaking to the earth, which was now formed, and he was playing with swatches, deciding on a color for the sky. For the early part of the morning, the atmosphere was pink, then yellow. Then he tried one other color, but decided on what we see now. For some, it's still black. That other color, it's a mystery. And in the distance, mountains went up, and a figure could be seen walking. Day 3. A whispering wind, a wandering spirit, birds, clay, duendes. The figure gets closer. Day 4. The rivers dried up, so we called on darkness. It got cold, so we called on light. A confetti of rain fell over the mountains. Even the figure stopped to see. Day 5. Love was created. So the things that crawled grew limbs and didn't move. For 100 days, the trees grew fruit, the mountains grew flowers in purples and reds. The sound of water was heard, and the breeze was perfect. The crawlers, now upright, smiled and felt things inside. but still had no eyes. The figure disappeared too. Day 6. There was a vibration in the air. To describe it, a bass whomp. The skin on the upright thing that no longer crawled rattled. From its head emerged eyes, and the vibrating stopped. Yellow flowers bloomed all around its feet. Over the hills, roars and grunts, a stampede chasing a sunset. The figure fell into a deep sleep. The animals were marking their territory. Day 7. God walks the land. The animals graze on the yellow flowers. The birds glide above. The figure opens its eyes. God says, "You will be a man, reproducer, and ally. I will return in 400 years and introduce you to a perfect mate. Man works the land, eats and drinks and grows strong. Then come the giants, non human, half beast, half something else." Day 8, the figure appears anew. Day 9, the man is tired. God appears as promised. It's 400 years since they spoke. The earth has formed. The mountains took shape. The seasons learned each other. The rivers crossed each other, and the seas took their piece of the world. The giants lived and died, and some disappeared into the woods and sky. On day 9 of God, he finished creating the world with the introduction of woman. On day 11, a child was born, a boy who is yet to be identified. The boy would be named COVID-19.
Thank you.
God is 1. God is an open wound, a kung fu movie, and a celestial sicario. God made our president with leftover road cotton and grackle droppings. His sandals are leftover human skin with from the factory of suicide rock stars. Today he wears the kneecaps of Janus to match his UFO belt. God is unfazed at 3 p.m. He whispers to me from a 6 feet distance. God lays naked on steel surfaces with his long hair covering the shadow of men. God has a sticker on his chest that reads, "I voted." He's nonchalant. He has a twin. She does all the good work. 2. God is your God's God, yoga and breathing. She is the breath of life. Latex gloves and exhaling the sun over mountains. She is the blamed, the curve, the torn Achilles heel. God is a beat poet, the coming strain, the big question, the control, the last minute mind changer, the finger on the gun, the safety switch. God is the ultimate filter, the event planner, the street cleaner, the thing in the sky that was there and then was not, the ventilator, the death toll. She knows the bodies are coming. 3. God is language, a lisp and stutter. God has Down syndrome, the autistic genius, the only child. From the other side of the tracks, have you ever thought of God as old? The wrinkled hobo and toothless smoker, the girl next door, the square jawed bad hombre, creator of a new earth between ellipses, growing peonies on hyphens. God is soil and water, the trans angel, the monk making booze, the anorexic gargoyle breaking off a ledge, the movement in the painting. God's number is 8 digits behind iron bars, the noisemaker, the vuvuzuela in purgatory, guilty. God is doing time. 4. God is a found poem in exile, an unbelievable truth, an asteroid belt crash, mammoth, that sound, that silence. 5. God is tired of rising on Easter. God is trying to figure out the diameter of this pandemic, writing ghostly hymns for the dead. Did you know God was the celestial laureate? Skywritings, the sounds you hear in the morning of birds and wind chimes, speeding cars and barking dogs. Did you know the sound was just that? Commotion? God writes those sounds into existence every day. I know when God is in a Motown mood, a hippie rock, or just a lounging jazz mood. And when it's too quiet, God let the whiskey get the better of him. 6. God likes to drink with me. I listen. Generation Z. They both stare at their phones. Kid tugs at dad's shirt. Then mother's dress. Neither budge. Kid sits on floor, picks up a snake, eats the snake, then throws up. Kid stands up, begs for attention, sits back down, picks up a gun, puts gun in mouth, pulls the trigger. Parents stare at each other, get on their phone, download an app to give them instructions on how to cry. This was titled Sleepless in Pandemia. I can't sleep much these days, yet I'm tired and need to. I'm filled with strange dreams that seem to be building a mini series of grim realities at every turn. In the morning, I let out the dogs. There's a yellow haze that floats in my town, a stick to your skin enfermedad. This pandemic has me thinking, is there a God? Then I remember the stories, the poetry and prose of the antepasados, the faith of my abuela, the observation of nature's language, and I breathe in place. Pandemia, virus. We seem to be more together in this distance. This morning, the first flock of loros made their way to the wires above our house, cantando, a grackle perched, head lowered, at a distance.
And
Last breath. Fire translates to I can't breathe. Looting translates to I can't breathe. We need to come together as a community. Please stop the violence. Translates to screaming, the language of the unheard. America has put the people of color on mute for too long, for that long, a long time ago. Racism still burns across this land. Broken glass is replaced, broken necks are not. Fire is put out by water, last breaths are put out by hatred. Burn America. Rising smoke is you on your knees, is you making excuses, is the last crackling ember of the lies you keep rubber bulleting into our face and chests. White America, you need to leave our country now. You need to oust the criminals in your family tree. You must find a cure for the virus in your DNA that executes daily. Learn a new language, one that speaks with kindness and humility and a colorblind lens. We don't like dying. We don't like burying our children, uncles, aunts, sisters, brothers, fathers, mothers, grandparents. Don't beg us to stop being angry for the sake of a grocery store, a gas station, a racist monument, or anything else. It sounds like a joke when you want to exchange this for calm until the next murder of another brother or sister or child. Hold your hands up in the air. Hold your breath. Let us leave the room for a while. You may die, but at least you weren't terrorized until your last breath.
Thank you, Edward.
Thank you.
So to close our discussion of Pandemia and other stories, ironically, I want to take us back to the beginning, actually to the preface material. Please tell me, or please tell us more about your selection of Dorfman's excerpt. I believe it's from In Case of Fire in a Foreign Land, new and collected poems from 2 languages. The excerpt before your first poem reads, "And for the plague that grows and snarls on the road, I have salves, spells. Don't you see them? I demand guarantees. Nothing must happen to me." So, as a Salvadoran American poet who has made his home in LA and then South Texas borderlands, what was your attraction to this Argentinian, Chilean American writer, activist, and this excerpt in particular, in which you borrow to set the tone of and theme and hope for your collection, for your cultures, and for your communities?
I was reading Ariel Dorfman's collection actually um, during the time I was writing Pandemia, and I was really engulfed in his collection, Last Waltz in Santiago, and I was getting to know more about his writings through another collection that's an anthology of poetry by, oh, and I wish I had it here. But it's an anthology that I have there that I use for reference all the time, and it's and I came across his because it's grouped with Roque Dalton and others. So again, the researcher, right? And so I came across him, and then I purchased his book because I liked the poem that was in there, and here we go. And so it's funny because we've had a few email exchanges, he and I, um, and I'm trying to get him to come to Flower Song Press actually. So I'm not bugging him as much, but he's written some stuff. This is from Penguin Publishers, and so I just love his collection. I love his activism. I love that he writes, le echa ganas for a good cause, and for the truth of his country, and what needs to be said, and this is a collection of poems of exile and disappearance,
Ah,
which
okay.
which is very for me, it falls into the whole thing about knowing more about Roque Dalton also,
Mm.
because Roque was, he was murdered, and so it's all in that, it's all in the group that's uh, and that part of one of his writings that was in the collection of my book just fit right.
Mm.
It just felt like it belonged. I'm always looking for signs. I'm always looking for things that trigger something, and I hate using that word, but I'm always looking for something that picks at my brain,
Mhm.
and then had the word plague in it, and then nothing must happen to me. That's going back to activism. I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff in this book that might not sit well with you, and after all is said and done, nothing better happened to me because of it. It's the whole thing about, I know that it's dangerous sometimes in other countries to write truths. Sometimes, like in Mexico, for example, and in other countries, you hear of journalists and other writers go missing, poets get killed, you know, and so this is kind of like saying, you know, nothing must happen to me with what I'm going to write. And even though it's about pandemia, there's also activism in there, and so it just felt right. It just felt right.
Right. It's what we all, I guess, anchor ourselves to, that the United States of America is still a strong enough democracy where we can speak
True,
our freedom
true.
of truth and speak for peace without
And
having violence come our way.
and even though we do have a lot to fight about, I refuse to accept the whole thing about you're lucky you're able to still write about it here. Like there shouldn't be an you're able to still in that sentence, right? Everyone should be able to write what they want to write. It's up to you if you want to read it. That should be up to the reader. And it goes back to everything. It goes back to being, pro-choice. You may not like something, but you're not the one having to do it or go through it. It's not yours.
Mhm.
It's not your mind to read my, okay? You don't want to read my book, you need to ingest it. That's your choice. Like everything else. No te metas en lo que no es tuyo,
Mhm.
right? If I don't like the taste of anchovies in my pizza, I'm not going to eat it,
Mhm.
right? And that should be the same for everything. You know, if it's going to cause you harm, you don't ingest it or you don't get involved in it. You don't go into that car that your friends told you get into. We're going to go do a drive-by shooting.
Mhm.
You don't get into it. You stay outside of it and you don't get involved, right?
Right.
You don't run into a building that's on fire. You don't jump over a bridge that your friend jumped over, you know, because he said, let's do it. I mean, it's all about choices and it's all about, you know, common sense. That's what it boils down to. And kindness.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Edward. We're going to move to closing now. And I did want to touch on Flower Song Press before we ended this interview for Voices of a Pandemic. So let me just ask a couple of broad questions that you can take in detail in any way you wish. Um, but I'd like to invite you to share with us more about your experiences being an editor-in-chief and publisher at Flower Song Press. According to the Flower Songs website, this is a small press that nurtures the voices of the borderlands and those of Latin America, the USA, and even globally. We think about borderlands identity at a global level. How long have you held this position as editor-in-chief and publisher at Flower Song? And how has the pandemic affected day-to-day operations financially or otherwise at Flower Song Press?
Um, I've been, I've had the press for 3 years now,
Mhm.
and it's it's just made well. I haven't stopped working. We haven't stopped putting out publications because people can still read from home.
Mhm.
You know, it has made it to where we can go out there and read in public, but we're able to do virtual readings and stuff like that. So it's just being having had to adapt to what has happened, and a lot of people are just waiting for it to finish to be able to go out there, and I just feel that we can't wait. We still need to build a library. We still need to continue to work just as hard in putting work out there because people aren't stopping the way they write, and we want people to, in other words, I'm looking for people that are and authors that are writing, their history, their today, their right
Mhm.
now. And so um these are collections that are being written by people right now during
Mhm.
these times. So you're gonna find, poetry coming out of Flower Song Press with, the vein of pandemia and civil unrest and you know everything that's going on and politically and women's issues and racial issues and everything that's there, and border issues and immigration issues and all of that. Now if I waited and I wait to for all this to blow over. I mean, we don't know when it's going to happen. And again, like I said, will we be here tomorrow or to see the end of it blow over? So we need to continue working. We need to continue, you just saying this is our new normal. Every day is our new normal. Every day is our new normal. So whatever is handed to us, we need to work with it and attack it.
Yeah.
So it's we continue to put out books. We continue to read manuscripts. We continue to um, talk with um, different people, and the only thing that has changed is uh, sales wise is to bookstores and schools, because they've been teaching remotely, but we're in the hopes that they're opening up soon, and they'll see that, hey, since we last left Flower Song, wow, now they have this. So it's more like they've got catching up to do
Mm.
with us, you know.
Yeah. And so were I guess, bookstores, small, medium, large, and the schools, were they a large revenue stream for you all, or do you do most of your selling on digital, like Amazon and other e-commerce
A
spaces?
little bit of both. A lot of our authors are they're go-getters and good marketers themselves, so they do a lot of self-selling,
Mm,
and through our press site we sell books, and we just now um have had two award winners for our press, and it's the first two novels that we published both won awards. One won the Texas Institute of Letters award for best book of first fiction,
mm,
and the second, that was for Luz at Midnight by Marisol Cortez out of San Antonio and the Austin area over there. And then out of California, Sonia Gutierrez for Dreaming with Mariposas won the Tomas Rivera award for older readers. So we're excited about that. And then we had two finalists also for poetry for the Texas Institute of Letters. So I feel like Flower Song Press is being recognized, out there with the rest of the small presses, and rightly so. We've got some really great authors. They stand up there with the greatest of them. You
mhm,
know, they do just as good, um, and sometimes some get noticed and some don't, and some of us live in obscurity, and we just do the work because it's important to us.
It seems like you're a very timely and necessary venue, especially for poets and writers trying to make it and be recognized in South Texas, and in particular the Lower Rio Grande Valley, El Valle. I noticed that your collection of poetry that we just spoke about and you read from is published with Aslan Libre Press. I believe they're out of San Antonio, correct?
Right. Hmm.
And of course, there's a larger press, Arte Público, that's been around for a few decades. How have you kind of found your way and made your space in the venue of presses out there that do hope and seek to find and give voice to Latino, Latina, Latinx, and in particular Mexican American writers?
Well, I see them all as familia,
Mm,
because we're all putting out the works of our people. Again, we have to see each other as one, um, doing different things, but it's like just a different arm of
mhm,
literature. So where one of them might focus more on the Mexican American writers, and one might, let's say, focus more on the children's aspect of Latinx writers, and some might, like us, we're doing a little bit of everything.
mhm,
Um, so we're all one. I'm working closely with um, Prickly Pear Publishing, who published my book Jazzhouse, and they're out of New Mexico with Odilia Galvan Rodriguez, who I think I spoke to you about, is a relative of Americo Paredes,
mm,
and so I'm working closely with her, and we're teaming up and bringing our presses and working together, where we help each other out and give each other that support to continue to put out voices. So
mm,
yeah, so it's being able to work together and not as a competition,
Mhm.
because we go back to uh uh the level like we talked about, where we on the streets don't support each other, because of competition or because of race or because of, oh, you're from that side of the tracks. But in literature, we have to see ourselves as hermanos and hermanas, and that's how we have to do it, and understand that one's doing one thing and the other's doing another, and then we help each other in so many ways. When I come across a tidbit of information that will help someone, I try to pass it on, like, hey, did you hear about this book award that they're asking about? Instead of saying, I'm not going to tell them because I want my press to win, or I want, you got to remember, I'm also an author.
Right.
So my books are also in the running for certain things. But to me, it's like, I'd rather see, um people from the press, get that um that victory,
Mhm.
because then if they it's for all. I feel like we all win,
Right.
we have to celebrate each other, always, you know otherwise competition kills.
And are you aware of any Latino Latinx presses that did not survive the pandemic or on a life support right now?
Not that I know of, to be honest with you. I know that we're always hanging by a thread, and we're always looking and pushing for donations and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, but again, if we're like, for example, the Flower Song Press is being run by, me, and then I fall into that introvert part sometimes when it comes to things like that. I'm very shy, so that's why it's important to look for people that to work with in team that handle things like that, because then they do the work that maybe I'm not good at. That
Yeah.
maybe that's not my forte, maybe that's not where my strong points are. But I have somebody that will say, hey, this came up, I'm going to do it, I'm going to send a letter, or I'm going to call a bookstore and see if they could get our books in there. That's We're always looking for that kind of help and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I'm real shy. I mean, I know there's probably interns I could use from the universities and say, hey, you want to put your name on a resume for the future as like editor, or somebody who helped with you know marketing. And you could use, when people look at the press, you're going to see that we're established. We have over 30 books, and to the press, and we're not just we're a small press, but we're not a small press you know
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I have a couple of graduate students who want to get into publishing, and they would have loved to have interned at a press. But please let me know if that's an option, and I'd love to send them your way. Really brilliant students. Um,
yeah, and I have to just like figure out what the description of what the job would be,
mhm.
because I do it all, you
Yeah.
know, because I pretty much do it all.
Or
And I'm like, oh,
right,
what can I give? Because it's like I want to give it, but like I still want to know what's going on. You know what I mean?
right.
It's just I'm real careful with it,
Mhm.
but I do know, and I recognize, and I'm aware that I need it.
Right.
Yeah.
And another pandemic related question, was the press able to apply for any government aid or PPP loans to help you all stay afloat?
I applied for several grants that were out there for artists and presses and stuff, but I didn't get any of them.
Mm.
Um, but it's okay, because there were a lot of artists that they live off being artists, and they lost their jobs, so they needed to sustain themselves by paying rent and stuff. And I have a full-time job, so I was okay by not getting it. So um you know
Or
that's where I'm
full
okay, losing,
or
that's
full-time
where,
jobs, right? If you consider the publishing with the restaurant managing.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I haven't, I'm fortunate that I have insurance, that I have a car, that I have a job, and maybe if I see that it gets to a point where I need to do that, maybe I just need to slow down on things,
Of course. Of course.
and back up on stuff, and maybe pull some projects, to the back for a while, and until we get back on track. But um I did apply for several, and again, I'm not great at writing grants. I'm not great at, maybe I didn't know, maybe I didn't apply the right way. Maybe I missed something that they were looking for. And that's where probably I need somebody who knows, when they're applying for stuff like that, knows exactly what it is they're looking for, and can help, and stuff like that.
Mm,
All the money that's made, through the royalties for the press, always go back into the press, so it's like, there's neither the poet nor the publisher's gonna get rich from it.
mhm.
But hey, you write that best-selling novel or something, and you might get some, some good cash that helps you out.
Mhm. And yes, there's definitely been, just as you have not been shut down by the COVID-19 pandemic, neither has Flower Song Press. I noticed that on Flower Song's website, you have quite a list of forthcoming authors, which includes former National Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera.
Yeah.
I saw on there award-winning YA middle grade fiction author Renee Salania, as well as award-winning San Antonio author Carmen Tafoya, among many others and up-and-comers. So
Right.
before we close, could you please speak to how you've been able to mobilize and amass, as well as sustain this growing network of authors that are established, as well as up-and-comers that are now signed with Flower Song?
Well, I truly respect their work. I'm a reader. Um, I'm a fan. I'm an advocate for poetry, and I think they see that poetry to me, or publishing to me, isn't a business, but a calling, and something that's beyond a business, that it's more of a necessity of getting the works out for future generations,
Hmm.
for people in the now that need to hear voice, listen to their voices. um I think I don't know what their past publishers were like. I can't speak on that, but I know that I'm very accessible. I know that I'm also, I again, like I said, I'm a big fan of theirs. I respect their works. I I read it, I reference it. I share it, so it's I think when they see that somebody acknowledges you as a person, not only as a writer, but also as a person, that it makes an impact. um I'm hoping that's why they're coming over to the dark side. But no, but the goal is to um do good by them, and knowing that their voices are important to me, and not just to me, but to everyone.
Mhm.
um that we need to continue, uh, to get their works out there, because um and they know that also I'm a headhunter of literature. I'm out there looking for the artists that, again, that are great, but are also obscure, that 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 just write, but won't do, um I don't know, that are out there writing always, and this generation might not know about them. And I use that as an example with, like, Alurista, for example. Alurista, he's been a great, asset to the Chicanx movement, and writings, and literature, and and everyone can attest to that. Juan Felipe Herrera and Luis Alberto Urrea and Denis Chavez, and all of them talk highly about how he made a difference in their life with writing. And so I know he made a big difference in mine when I was beginning to write poetry, because he was one of the first poets I saw perform when he came to visit the Valley. And when I first started to get into publishing, I said, I'm going to publish him because he made an impact, because people need to continue to read him, not just the old works, but I'm sure he still writes,
Mhm.
because writers write, because he's still alive. And just because he wrote a long time ago, I mean, he was writing when I was born, 73. I was born in 1973. He was kicking ass on the streets, and fighting a good fight, you know and and I think that was important, and that's why I want to keep those voices alive and going, and not let them go into that okay, they've done their work and that's it. No, they're still prominent and they're still important, and we need to continue to shine the light on them. And then we have the younger poets. you know I have Javier Vargas from El Salvador, 19 years old, probably 20 when the book comes out. He's from the town where I was conceived, Santa Ana. And I searched for him, not knowing I was going to find him, but
Mm.
I was looking for a voice from that town because I said, there's got to be a poet there. Right. And so I looked and I searched and I asked, and is there poetry there? And then I came across a blog and I came across some writing, and I'm like, I like this. And he's from there. And I reached out and I said, do you have more poetry? He goes, yeah. I go, do you have a manuscript? He goes, yeah, I have a manuscript length collection. And so I said, do you mind if we publish your manuscript? I mean, after I read it, I go, can you send it to me? And I read it, and I was like, I just fell in love with this poetry. And then I said, do you mind if I introduce you to the poetry, to introduce your poetry to Flower Song Press and to the United States, to this side of the border? I go, and do you mind if we get it translated so we can have both your writings and the English writing, so we can have them both? And we've been doing that for a little close to a year now, and he's almost out. And so I'm super excited. And so that's what I want to feel every time a book comes out. I want to feel super excited. I want to feel like it's something like it's like my favorite band or group or rappers new release. It's like when Ice Cube's always been my favorite rapper. So when I knew his new album was gonna drop, I was like excited. I couldn't sleep the night before because I wanted to go down to the record shop and get it. That's how I want to feel every time I put out a book, and that's how I feel. When the proofs come when I get the proofs in the email and I see them and I'm there and I'm like, I get excited. And then when the books come in the mail, it's like I get as excited as, I guess, the author when they get their first set of books. I want to hold the book. I want to feel it. And it's funny. I don't think my wife notices it, but on my nightstand, I always have like the most recent Flower Song collection, you know, and I have it there, and I'm there in bed and I'll be reading it, even though I've read it, probably several times already, but in actual book form, it's different. And so yeah, that's maybe that is the energy I give off to authors, and they want to be a part of that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Edward. And as a closing question, uh, could you, and this takes you back into a domestic role, which a lot of our roles have now overlapped with domestic roles as we're been in this pandemic and are working our way out of it with the vaccines and such. But can you share any stories or experiences of fatherhood, being a brown father in pandemic times, as well as maybe doubling in the roles of educator or guidance counselor for your daughter who's in her early teen years? How has the pandemic affected fatherhood?
She just turned 14, and it's been a ride, and it's the years have flown by. I still have the pictures of when she was tiny, and I remember taking baths with her when she was a baby, and just doing all the reading on fatherhood, because I mean, I grew up with a mother. I didn't have the father figure until later on in my youth, when a stepfather came in, and even when he came in, he was doing what my mom was doing, working all the time. So there was never that father son situation for me. So I didn't. I was scared. How am I going to be a dad? And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because there's things that if I could go back, I would do differently. But overall, it's been scary. We've had our moments, and it's been beautiful seeing her grow, seeing her, be this, real smart and energetic young lady. She's very much like my wife. And just it's watching her, as a child grow up, and being able to give her the things that I couldn't have as a child, and then just, but also explaining to her, and just having those one-on-ones and talking to her on, like, kind of giving her the different aspects of, how I grew up and how she's growing up, and how to appreciate, you know, certain things, and how she could do even better than what she has for her kids, and that would still be wonderful, because she has good things, and it's not necessarily materialistic things, but just, she's in a home with a father and mother, and that was, to me, and I tell her, that was, not a lot of us had that growing up, and you could go to both parents and you're getting also double the love, and even sometimes when you're angry and you're throwing a fit, you still have those two parents that support and love you, and that, even though you're going through a moment. Um but it's exciting, to see her going into her high school now, and now it's like turning it up, it's like really getting into that. Okay, we got to start thinking college. We got to That mentality needs to be focused on that, and responsibilities, and just getting her ready for adulthood. Because it's gonna fly by fast. And we can't just think, oh, she's got time. She doesn't. She's growing into a young lady. She's getting into. I'm starting to think about girls her age when I was a boy,
Mm,
and I was like, what were they thinking when they were her age? What were they doing? What were the boys doing with the girls at that age? So
mm,
I have to give her advice and say, hey, you got to keep an eye out for this.
mhm,
You have to focus on this. You have to realize that whatever happens at this age, you're going to get to my age and think, wow, I did that, or that wasn't really that important. And why did I stress out over it? So I have to let her start to think about, when I need to get to this level in my life, and prepare myself and be prepared so that I can do all the things that I love, and not expect or hope that it happens on its own. Yeah, it's so much that needs to be done, and I think it's, again, on a daily,
yeah.
everyday talks. It's everyday choices. Even us, sometimes I have to go into the room and tell her I'm sorry, because I think about it, or my wife will tell me, you did it the wrong way,
Mm,
or I catch myself and I'm like, I reacted the wrong way to it, you know.
Yeah.
And so I have to go back and be able to say, you know what, I realize that I did this and I apologize and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, and again, it's kind of like in the restaurant business, being able to um, appreciate and being able to coach and develop
Mm.
staff and being able to let them know where their strengths are, but also throw in that, but this is what you need to work on. I love how you did this. I love how you do this. You're so good at this. Can you work a little bit on this part so that it can get better? So all the praise is in there, but you're also throwing in something that needs to work, that needs to be fixed, but it doesn't look like a chingazo or something that they'll resist because you've already praised them so much. So they appreciate the chanclazo after you've already given them ice cream and cake and an iPhone and whatever. And then here's a chingazo for the bad that you did, but it's okay because I got all this. So okay, I'll fix that. You know, so just being, it's scary. You know, she's not a baby anymore, you know, but she will always be my baby, but she's not a baby anymore. So it's and it also changes the dynamic of the marriage, right? Because we have to become different parents, and it makes us different husband and wife because um e- we're growing also into another stage of, you know, she's gonna, you know, leave the nest soon, and you know, what are we going to do with ourselves, right? You know, we're so used to her being here. So yeah, it takes a lot of adapting.
Yes. And the pandemic, would you say then that it is made you more sensitive to your daughter's needs now that she's been at home with her schooling more?
Right. Yeah, it's been a little more appreciative of our time together.
Time together. Mhm.
And it's shown us that it's we can be together, and that we want to be together more,
Right.
and you don't, yeah, there's been a lot of good things that have come
Yeah.
from this.
As well as your reflections of our finite selves in mortality with the
Right.
ways COVID has affected some of your close family unit there.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about the great things because so many people have gone through tragedy,
Mhm.
and you don't want to hit a very sensitive subject. But even people that have gone through tragedy, if aware, can find the things that, um, if they were aware, can find that changed them for the better.
Right. That makes sense. All right, Edward, thank you so much. Is there any other story or experience that you would like to share before we close?
I think I think we're
We've
good.
covered a lot. I really appreciate your time, Edward. Talked about fatherhood, we talked about poetry, talked about publishing at Flower Song, as well as your adolescence, where you've come from, where you are, and where you're going with the college aspirations on the horizon. I think you're gonna be able to bring a lot to the program that whatever program it is that you enter into. So thank you so much, Edward Vidaurre, for this time with us at UTRGV Voces of a Pandemic.
Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias.